Chapter 40. What do you mean? Chi Rongji, that shrew, splashed water on Yuru. What else can we do? In a while, we will go and tell the general, and ask Magistrate Qi to give us an explanation. Previously, the matter between Yuru and Qi Tianyu was so big, and the general felt that we owed Magistrate Qi. But this time, they are in the wrong. Madame D gritted her teeth as she walked. Madam, do you mean to use this incident to make up for what happened before? Nanny Zhou hurried to catch up with Madame D and asked in a low voice. Madame D's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly stopped and her eyes lit up. Yes, that's it. If they still want Chi Rongji's reputation, they must take responsibility for what happened to Yuru. Otherwise, they can forget about it. Chi Rongji is such a vicious person. How could she ruin someone's face just because of a little fantasy? If this gets out, who would dare to marry her in the future? Madam, do you mean to talk to Magistrate Qi's wife first? Nanny Zhou understood and said. Yes, we need to have a good talk. But don't rush. Let's leave them hanging. This time, we are not the ones who are anxious. Madame D walked again and smiled sinisterly. Her daughter's reputation was ruined. Although the capital city was far away and the news might not reach the capital city, it would be great if Magistrate Qi could change his mind. Originally, she wanted Qin Wanru to be the scapegoat. But looking at the current situation, she could only think of another way to make her bear the responsibility. Since Chi Rongji had come here, she could not escape. Although Madame Li was also a shrew, both families had requests. Wouldn't it be better to discuss and push all the blame to others and free the daughters of both families? By then, not only Qin Wanru, but even Shui Rulan might lose her reputation because of this incident. Thinking of this, Madame D smiled proudly. At this time, she had to write a letter to the capital city to ask for help. If Yuru suffered a little, she could push the blame of losing her reputation to Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan. This was not a bad thing. Madame D believed that her maiden family in the capital city should have good ointment given by the palace. Qin Yuru's injury would be fine. Qin Wanru didn't go back to her room. She sat on her swing frame and bit her red lips slightly. Her body slowly swayed along with the swing frame in her hand, and she frowned absent-mindedly and calculated. Madame D had always been cunning and resourceful. If she was not careful, she might be backfired. Some things could not be calculated by herself. She needed someone to cooperate with her. So the problem at this moment was to find the person who cooperated with her, and this person had to be found in Magistrate Qi's mansion. As for Chi Rongji, she had to let them push the blame to others so that Madame D and Madame Li could not negotiate with each other and finally push all the blame to others. Of these two women, one was cunning and vicious, and the other was shrewd and cruel. If they worked together, he would definitely be used as a shield. It seemed that he had to ask Yu Feng to go to Qi Baiyu and ask him to bring up the matter in the magistrate's office. Thinking in her heart, she loosened the swing in her hands. When she was about to get up, she suddenly heard a slight voice. Qin Wanru, Qin Wanru. This voice was very familiar. Qin Wanru was shocked and looked up immediately. She saw a teenager squatting on the opposite wall. Her watery eyes widened. It was Qi Baiyu who she was looking for. Brother Baiyu. Qin Wanru jumped off the swing and rushed to the wall. She looked up and saw the teenager lying on the bed and smiled. The teenager was holding a tree trunk on one side and half squatting on the wall. His round eyes were full of vigor. With a smile on his face, a pair of shallow dimples made his smile look clean and sunny, with a bit of youthful exuberance. He was very good-looking. Seeing Qin Wanru under the wall, he smiled and waved to her. Qin Wanru looked around and saw two square wooden boxes piled up in the corner. She hurried to carry them over. Fortunately, they were empty, so it was not too difficult to carry them. She carried the wooden boxes to the wall where Qi Baiyu was squatting. One was on the top, and the other was on the bottom. Then she climbed up tremblingly. Qin Wanru, be careful. Seeing her climbing up tremblingly, the smile on the teenager's face disappeared and he reminded her nervously. This wooden box did not look solid and was a little wobbly. Qi Baiyu was really afraid that this little girl would fall down. He reached out his hand and wanted to hold Qin Wanru in case she fell down before she could stand still. I'm fine. Qin Wanru climbed up carefully and stood up slowly. She held Qi Baiyu's hand and her body wobbled. She was so scared that her face turned as pale as snow. She leaned against the wall and did not dare to move anymore. Qin Wanru, are you okay? Qi Baiyu's face turned pale because of the wobble of his hand. He held Qin Wanru's little hand tightly and asked nervously. I'm fine. Qin Wanru calmed herself down and looked at the sunshine teenager who was climbing on the wall. She asked in a low voice, Brother Baiyu, why are you here? What a coincidence. She was just about to ask someone to find Qi Baiyu, and he came. What a coincidence. Our girl cried and shouted to come back. I knew something happened, so I came to see what happened. How are you? Are you okay? Qi Baiyu held Qin Wanru's hand and smiled when he found she was not wobbling. Did they say anything when they went back? Qin Wanru was anxious to know what happened to Qi Rongji and her daughter. Yes, how could they be okay? Chuani was beaten half to death, and a few servant girls who came with her were sold. What a scene. Now Qi Rongji is in a mess. My good brother is still defending your good sister, saying that Qi Rongji is too unruly. Qi Rongji's face is swollen because of Qin Yuru, so she won't let it go. They are arguing fiercely. Qi Baiyu took a blade of grass out of nowhere and put it in his mouth casually. The sunshine teenager looked a bit like a ruffian now. Qi Tianyu still thinks that Qin Yuru was framed. Qin Yuru is really resourceful. Qin Wanru sneered, and a trace of hostility flashed in her eyes. It was the same in her previous life. No matter how she explained, it was useless. Qi Tianyu believed that she ruined the marriage between him and Qin Yuru. She made him watch his beloved marry someone else, and he was determined to betray her. Even though she was so miserable at that time, and she found some evidence, Qi Tianyu seemed to be blinded. He just didn't believe her, and together with Qin Yuru, they tortured her, and even almost destroyed her innocence. Can you let them make a scene? Make it big now, and let more people know. Qin Wanru gritted her white teeth. Make it big now. Qi Baiyu raised his eyebrows. Yes, make it big, and it will be out of control. Make it impossible for the two families to be reconciled. Qin Wanru nodded and said softly. Even if Qi Tianyu still believed Qin Yuru, what could he do? He was only one person, and the power of one person was really nothing before he became powerful. Okay, we happen to have guests in our mansion today. Mother has invited many people to talk about something. Qi Baiyu nodded and said. What? Qin Wanru was surprised. It's about my eldest brother. Originally, my eldest brother thought that the first miss of your mansion might have been wronged, so he specially asked my mother to invite some people from our clan over to talk about this matter. He said that someone in your mansion might have plotted against Qin Yuru, but now Qi Rongji has ruined it. Qi Baiyu sneered and said. Then you help to expose this matter, and let all the people in your mansion know. Let's see if the two families can be reconciled. Qin Wanru blinked her bright eyes and said. Okay, then I'll go back. Qi Baiyu nodded and wanted to let go of the branch on the side to jump down from the wall, but he paused and said, You go first, I'll watch you go down. I'll be fine, you go. Qin Wanru shook her head. She was afraid that things would be delayed, so the sooner, the better. Seeing the eagerness in Qin Wanru's eyes, Qi Baiyu helplessly reached out to touch her head and said, Okay, then be careful when you go down, don't fall. Compared with the arrogant and domineering Qi Rongji, Qi Baiyu always thought that the so-called sister should be like Qin Wanru, soft and cute. In the past, when the two families were together, Qi Baiyu was also more willing to play with Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru would not look down on his identity as a son of a concubine, nor would she be arrogant and spoil everything, blaming others, and vent her anger on the servants when she was in trouble. "I'll be careful, you go." Qin Wanru withdrew her hand from Qi Baiyu's hand, squatted down carefully, and shook her head at the top, saying, "You go quickly, don't be late, those people in your mansion have gone back." "Okay, then I'll go." Qi Baiyu saw that when she squatted down, the wooden box only shook a little, and it seemed to be stable, so he was relieved. After saying goodbye to Qin Wanru, he held the branch on the side and slid out of the wall neatly, and then stood under the tree. In the past, when he secretly came to play with Qin Wanru, he often slid past this tree, so he was familiar with it. After getting down from the tree, Qi Baiyu turned and strode into the mansion. Qi Rongji was making a fuss at this time, and a little provocation could make things worse. Since there were many people here, it was easier to do things. Hearing the footsteps outside the wall disappeared, Qin Wanru was relieved. Qi Baiyu was always smart, and this kind of thing was not difficult for him to do. She believed that she would hear about the trouble in Magistrate Qi's mansion soon, and this time, the superficial peace between the two mansions could not be maintained. She just wanted to cut off Qin Yuru's evil helper. Carefully holding the wooden box, she put one foot down, stepped on it a few times, and finally stepped on a frame. She tiptoed a few times, and felt that it was solid, so she put another foot down. When she came up, she just wanted to talk to Qi Baiyu quickly, so she did not feel afraid. Now that the wooden box shook a little, she suddenly felt scared. Biting her lip, she stood still, steadied herself, and put another foot down. This time, she stepped firmly on the ground, and this time, she really stepped on the ground. Chapter 41. Her body involuntarily fell to the side. Qin Wanru was so flustered that she closed her eyes tightly and prepared to bear the pain of the fall. Unexpectedly, after a heavy shock, the sharp stinging pain did not come. It seemed that it was just a slight shock. Her lower body was a little soft, not like a very hard ground. She reached out to touch it unbelievably and found it was a little warm. "Qin Wanru, you are dead." A suppressed voice came from under her body. Qin Wanru hurriedly opened her eyes and was stunned to see a pair of eyes with a little bit of a gloomy and angry look, and it was a little familiar. She glanced at the corner of her eyes and saw the faint blood color on the thin lips. It turned out to be Chu Luchen. Why was he here? Having no time to think too much, she suddenly stood up and subconsciously pushed him with her hands. "Qin Wanru, are you courting death?" Chu Luchen gave a muffled groan. Then he remembered that he was heavily pressed to the ground again. Qin Wanru was frightened by his angry voice. She loosened her hands and pressed her body down again. The two of them stared at each other again. On his beautiful eyes, the long and curly eyelashes were also clear, and each of them seemed to be clearly seen. "Master!" Someone screamed. The sharp voice scared Qin Wanru and made her tremble. Her hand was pulled to one side. Xiao Xuanzi rushed over from the side and hurriedly reached out to pull Qin Wanru away from Chu Liuchen's body. Then he carefully helped Chu Luchen to sit up. His face was even paler than Chu Liuchen's. Master, you can't be hurt. You can't be hurt." Xiao Xuanzi was so flustered that cold sweat came down from his forehead. While shouting, he gently patted Chu Liuchen's back. Qin Wanru felt that Chu Luchen didn't look well. He sat on the ground and lowered his head. From her angle, she couldn't see his face. But seeing his motionless appearance, Qin Wanru also panicked. She directly squatted beside him and reached out to help Xiao Xuanzi pat his back. Your Highness, are you all right?" Her eyes fell on his hands on his knees. He was clenching his fists hard. Fearing that he would hurt his hands, Qin Wanru hurriedly reached out to pull his fists. His fists were not very tight, but she loosened them. Qin Wanru squeezed her hands in and held his hands tightly. Although his hand was big, it was very cold. She tried her best to hold his hand, wanting to warm his palm. Prince, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. No one knew whether he was comforting Chu Luchen or Qin Wanru. She wanted to warm Chu Liuchen's hand, so she lowered her hand and stretched out her other hand, warming Chu Liuchen's hand with one hand. Chu Luchen had already recovered from the discomfort. At this time, he slightly raised his head. His long eyelashes fluttered twice and fell on Qin Wanru's pale little face. Her face was a little round, which didn't match her slender body. Her face looked a little rounder than her body, revealing the roundness of a child. Her skin was as white and tender as snow, which made her lips look even redder like blood. Her pair of jet-black eyes were so black that it made one's heart tremble. Her eyebrows and eyes were delicate and beautiful. In this way, she looked very beautiful, and that kind of beauty also had a slight charm. Although Qin Wanru was just a child, this slight charm mixed with her childishness inexplicably made people feel that the porcelain doll in front of them was extremely lovable. His eyes fell on the pair of thin white hands that held his hand tightly. The hand was so slender that it could almost be broken if he pinched it. The temperature of her hand was actually not high, not warm at all. But she was trying hard to send warmth to his hand, very lightly. "All right, I'm fine now," Chu Luchen said impatiently. He took his hand out of Qin Wanru's, stood up slowly with Xiao Xuanzi's hand, and coughed twice in a low voice. "Tell me, why are you having a rendezvous here at this time?" Chu Luchen looked down at Qin Wanru, who was still kneeling on the ground, and said coldly. I'm not having a rendezvous. I just have something to tell Big Brother Bai Yu about Qi Rongji." Seeing that he seemed to be fine now, Qin Wanru reached out to wipe the sweat on her forehead and climbed up with her hands on her waist. Although he cushioned her when she fell, she still felt that her waist seemed to be twisted and hurt a little. "Are you close to him?" Chu Luchen asked. Suddenly, he smiled, and his voice became lazy and gentle. "Kind of familiar. Brother Bai Yu is very nice and usually takes care of me." Qin Wanru complained secretly. She didn't know how she had annoyed the temperamental Prince Chen again. "Qin Wanru, men and women should not sit together when they are 8 years old. You don't need me to teach you this." Chu Luchen curved his lips into a smile, but there was a coldness and majesty in this smile that could not be ignored. "Brother Bai Yu is not someone else. We knew each other before we were 8 years old." Qin Wanru explained, biting her lips. "So you mean that I'm nosy?" Chu Luchen raised his eyes slightly, still smiling. He slowly took out a handkerchief from his arms and wiped the dark red on the corner of his mouth. There was a bit of coldness in his smile, which was chilling to the bone. Qin Wanru almost immediately knew that if she answered yes, he would not let her go so easily. Seeing Chu Liuchen's action of wiping, she hurriedly shook her head and said decisively, "Fortunately, Prince Chen saved me just now, otherwise I would have fallen to the ground." "Do you really think so?" Chu Liuchen's drooping long eyelashes fluttered twice, and he lightly asked. He spread the handkerchief in his hand, looked at the blood on the snow-white handkerchief, pushed Xiao Xuanzi away, walked slowly to Qin Wanru, spread the handkerchief in front of Qin Wanru, and then raised his head, looking at Qin Wanru with a pair of beautiful eyes faintly. "Yes, I really think so," Qin Wanru stuttered, but immediately bowed to Chu Luchen sideways. "Thank you for saving me, Prince Chen." "For saving your life," Chu Luchen said in a deep voice. "Ah." Qin Wanru raised her head in astonishment. "It's for saving your life? It's so high, are you sure you won't fall to your death?" Chu Luchen slightly raised his chin, motioning her to look up. Qin Wanru followed his line of sight, looked at the high wall, and then looked pitifully at the 2 overturned boxes on the side, grinned, and nodded with difficulty. "Yes, thank you for saving my life, Prince Chen." Even if she fell from such a high height, it was possible that she would twist her ankle or waist, but if she would twist her life, Qin Wanru would never believe it. However, under such a prince's burning gaze, Qin Wanru clearly knew that if she didn't follow the prince's meaning, she would definitely not have a good result. She knew it by looking at the handkerchief that he still spread in front of her. The blood on it seemed to be condemning Qin Wanru. You have to remember the favor of saving your life. It's not so easy to repay my favor. Chu Luqian looked at her, and suddenly laughed. Whatever you say, Prince Chen. As long as I can do it, I will do it. Qin Wanru gritted her teeth. That's good. Chu Luqian coughed in a low voice, turned his head to hold Xiao Xuanzi's hand, and turned to leave, but after a few steps, he suddenly turned back, pointed to the high wall, and said, Qin Wanru, there won't be a next time. Yes, Prince Chen, don't worry, there won't be a next time. Qin Wanru immediately promised. This prince was too difficult to deal with. If she didn't do as he said, he would never let her go so easily. But seeing that he spat blood, she knew that he was seriously injured just now. Qin Wanru was really afraid that something bad would happen to him. This prince's body was much weaker than ordinary people. If something really happened, she would never be able to pay for it. Come here, take it to wash. Chu Luqian stretched out his hand again, and there was the handkerchief on it. Yes, I'll wash it later. Qin Wanru hurriedly ran over with her hands on her waist, with the intention of condemning him, and reached out to take the handkerchief from Chu Luqian's hand. What's wrong with you? Chu Luqian looked at her hands on her waist and asked. I twisted my waist. Qin Wanru blinked and said pitifully. Do you have a waist? How can a child have a waist? A bucket waist? Chu Luqian tilted his head to look at her body, and smiled harshly, and it seemed that he was in a good mood. Qin Wanru pursed her lips, and felt that it was better not to stoop to his level. Just now he was bleeding, and now it was fine as long as he was happy, although his words sounded really uncomfortable. Remember to wash my handkerchief. After Chu Luqian smiled, he didn't make things difficult for her, and turned around with Xiao Xuanzi's help. He reached out to touch the corner of his mouth, and spat again. Just now he had bitten the tip of his tongue, and it was so painful that he almost cried. This little girl looked so thin, but the weight of the fall was not light, and his tongue was still burning with pain. Qin Yu met Qin Wanru on the way, and when she saw Qin Wanru coming over with her hands on her waist, she hurriedly ran over. Miss, what's wrong with you? You were fine when I left just now, how did you become like this in such a short time? Qin Wanru just asked Qin Yu to stay outside Qin Yuru's courtyard for a while. I accidentally fell. Qin Wanru touched her waist, and said bitterly with a tender face. Where did you fall, miss? How could you be so careless? Qin Yu looked at Qin Wanru, and knew that it was not a light fall, so she asked anxiously. Her eyes fell on Qin Wanru's hand, and when she saw the handkerchief with blood stains, her face immediately changed. Miss, where are you hurt, and you're bleeding? I'm fine, this handkerchief is not mine. Qin Wanru followed Qin Yu's eyes to her hand, and understood that Qin Yu had misunderstood, but she inexplicably felt guilty. Chu Luqian was really fine. His body really couldn't withstand the impact. Then whose is it? Why is it here, miss? Qin Yu asked anxiously. I'm fine, let's go back first, how's big sister? Qin Wanru shook her head, and leaned on Qin Yu. Qin Yu was 2 years older than her, and was also a head taller than her, so it was not difficult for her to hold her. Miss, I found something, but... Qin Yu hesitated when she heard Qin Wanru ask about what happened just now. Chapter 42. Miss, I saw Madam come back in a hurry with a few letters and enter first Mrs. Yard. Then she called an old maid in charge in. When the old maid in charge came out, she went out in a hurry with a few letters in her hand. I don't know if it has anything to do with Mrs. Matter. Qin Yu said worriedly. She hesitated because she didn't know if it was useful to Mississippi. Chin Wanru thought about it carefully and said, Madam left first Mrs. Yard in a hurry and came back with a few letters in her hand. Then she asked the old maid in charge to send the letters. Chin Yuru was in such a big trouble. If Madam D left Chin Yuru at this time to write a letter, it must be a letter to the capital city asking for ointment. The burn on Chin Yuru's palm was so serious that it was impossible for the doctors in Jiangzhou to cure it. So the most likely way was to ask Duke Yang's mansion in the capital city for ointment. Go to Nanny Yu now and ask her to find Brother Fengzi and try to get a letter. There were a lot of letters. It would be good to get any one of them. No matter if it was written by Chin Yuru or Madam D, they should have something useful to say. This, if Madam knew. Chin Yu reminded Chin Wanru worriedly. Wang Feng had smashed the bridal sedan chair before. If Wang Feng got involved again, Madam D would never let Nanny Yu and Wang Feng off. There's no need to let Wang Feng meet the old maid in charge directly. Chin Wanru smiled and said confidently. She stretched her head and whispered something in Chin Yu's ear. Chin Yu's eyes lit up and she kept nodding. She left Chin Wanru, who was holding her waist, and hurried back to the yard to find Nanny Yu. Chin Wanru continued to hold her waist and staggered back. When she returned to the gate of the yard, Chin Yu ran out again. Seeing Chin Wanru, she hurriedly reached out to hold her. When she was about to say something, Chin Wanru looked at her with her watery eyes. She immediately shut up and helped Chin Wanru into the yard. Seeing Chin Wanru coming back, the servant girls and old maids in the yard hurried to salute and then watched curiously as Chin Wanru held her waist and walked into the main room. What happened to second miss? Where did she hurt her waist? Could it be that second miss fought with someone? Yes, Miss Chi is still in the mansion. They won't fight again, will they? The servant girls and old maids in the courtyard began to discuss in twos and threes. Their voices were not loud, but they were accompanied by bursts of laughter, which was really ear-piercing. Chin Yu was so angry that she turned around and was about to scold him, but was stopped by Chin Wanru. Miss, look at these people. They don't really treat you as their master. Chin Yu said angrily. He even dared to gossip about her master, and he even had a gloating look on his face. She was so angry that her face turned pale. Let them speak first. Chin Wanru smiled lightly and sat down in front of the dressing table. Chin Yu hurriedly fetched a basin of water and helped her wash. He washed her face and helped her change her clothes. Miss, do you want to invite a doctor to take a look? There's no need. I'm much better now. I'm fine. Chin Wanru shook her head and reached out to touch her waist. It seemed that she was really fine this time, and it didn't hurt when she touched it. She didn't know whether it was because she was really small and didn't have a waist, or because she didn't twist it just now, but it just hurt. Miss, you'd better go and have a doctor. I'm always worried. Chin Yu said worriedly. I'm fine. Chin Wanru stood up and walked to the window. The gauze curtain of the window was down, so people outside couldn't see clearly, but people inside could see outside. After such a long time, several servant girls and old maids still gathered together to gossip. Bursts of presumptuous laughter came from the corner of the yard. There were really a lot of people gossiping around them. Especially a servant girl in the middle, she was talking enthusiastically just now, and she was still talking enthusiastically now. This was a 13 or 14-year-old servant girl. She looked as tall as Chin Yu, but her clothes were much more gorgeous than Chin Yu's. Looking from afar, even if she couldn't see the others, she had already seen her. Miss, Ching Chui just came back. When I was looking for Nanny Yu, she stopped me and asked where you were. Chin Yu quickly explained when she saw Chin Wanru's eyes fall on the gorgeous dress in the crowd. Ching Chui was also Chin Wanru's principal servant girl. A few days ago, she said that something happened to her mother at home, and then she asked for leave to serve her mother. In fact, she was just afraid to follow Chin Wanru to get married to Magistrate Qi. Knowing that Qi Tianyu would cause trouble on this day, Qing Chui certainly wouldn't suffer with him. She wholeheartedly wanted to serve Qin Yuru, but she didn't expect that Qin Wanru would be fine. Now, everywhere outside was saying that First Miss had no sense of shame, and in order to climb the social ladder, she had kicked the first young master of Magistrate Qi and dated a noble young master in the capital city. There were even people who implied that First Miss Qin had cheated on the first young master of the Qi family, and that she was already pregnant. After hearing the news, Qing Chui packed up and came back. At this time, she was in the courtyard asking people about what happened in the mansion. When Qin Wanru came back, she was in the room. When she saw Qin Wanru enter the courtyard, she deliberately slowed down and waited for Qin Wanru to enter the room before she came out to ask other servant girls and old maids in the courtyard about the news. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on her, and there was a deep sharpness in the little girl's eyes. In her previous life, when she was in trouble, Qing Chui came back immediately. However, she didn't go to serve Qin Yuru, whom she had always wanted to go to. Instead, she stayed by her side and helped Qin Yuru and Madame D set a trap for her. In the end, she even conspired with others to beat Qin Yu to death in the woodshed. It was great to see her again in this life. In fact, Qing Chui was already Madame D and Qin Yuru's woman. Otherwise, how could she know that her marriage was a disaster? "Miss, do you want me to call her in for questioning?" Qing Yu saw Qin Wanru's gloomy face and asked in a low voice. "No need." Qin Wanru shook her head. Her eyes fell on Qing Chui's gorgeous clothes, and her lips curved slightly. She slowly turned around and said, "This matter is not urgent." She was not in a hurry to deal with a servant girl. Her courtyard originally needed to be cleaned up, otherwise, the people in the courtyard would not see her as the real master. Since Qing Chui was the one who stood out, she would use her as the trigger and beat her up. The first miss of Magistrate Qi was beaten up by the first miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. This news caused a sensation in the entire Jiangzhou prefecture. It was said that when First Miss Qi came back that day, her face was swollen like a steamed bun and her clothes were untidy. The first miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion was not only vicious, despicable, but also arrogant. Not only did she not admit to her wrongdoings, but she also beat up her ex-fiancée's sister. Such a woman could easily be drowned in a pond. No, not drowned in a pond. In fact, she could have drowned a long time ago. If she was not the daughter of Ningyuan Army General, drowning in a pond would be considered a light punishment. Along with this news came another additional news, which was that second Miss Qin was not Madame D's biological daughter. Therefore, all the things that Madame D had done to Qin Wanru in the past were also exposed. Because she was not Madame D's biological daughter, all the bad things were pushed onto second Miss Qin, including the marriage that was inexplicably pushed onto her. For a moment, the entire Jiangzhou prefecture was talking about the bad reputation of Madame D and first Miss Qin. But then, another news came out. It was said that the doctor who treated first Miss Qin said that first Miss Qi had lied. First Miss Qi was also vicious. She had poured boiling porridge on first Miss Qin's face and was disrespectful to her elders. She had slapped the wife of Ningyuan Army General twice. The wife of Ningyuan Army General could not bear it anymore and hit Qi Rongji. When this news came out, the wife of Ningyuan Army General even invited some local officials' wives to the mansion to let them see the injured Qin Yuru. Compared to Qi Rongji's face, Qin Yuru's face and hands were seriously injured, especially the red and swollen blisters on her hands, which shocked all the officials' wives. Therefore, after the rumor of first Miss Qin being a despicable woman, first Miss Qi's reputation of being vicious and domineering came out. Although Ningyuan Army General's mansion failed to live up to the marriage arranged by Magistrate Qi, Qi Rongji, an unmarried miss, actually came knocking on their door and even wanted to ruin Qin Yuru's appearance. Her heart was really too vicious. The family that was originally discussing marriage with Qi Rongji immediately cancelled the marriage that was being discussed. If they married Qi Rongji, it would not be peaceful in the mansion. Who dared to marry such a vicious woman? Once the news came out, everyone knew that Magistrate Qi and Ningyuan army generals' mansions could no longer be as harmonious as before. If they got along, they might not even be able to maintain their relationship on the surface anymore. Hearing that Qin Yuru had made trouble again, Qin Huayong hurried to Madame D's yard and gave her a hard slap. Then he went to the study angrily and did not even look at Qin Yuru. When hearing the news, Qin Wanru was opening a letter. It was a letter sent by Wang Feng. The supervisor old maid took the letter and asked someone to send it directly to Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city. There was a process to find the person who had been sending the letter to the capital city. That person happened to be very familiar with Wang Feng, and they usually worked together. The old maid in charge came over to put the letter down and left. The messenger went to feed the horse and prepared for the journey. Wang Feng asked several people to help him sort out the things on the way and conveniently took away one of the letters. Now this letter was in Qin Wanru's hands. Coincidentally, this letter was written by Qin Yuru to Di Yan, the heir of Duke Yong in the capital city. In the letter, Qin Wanru not only expressed her longing for Di Yan, but also implicated Qin Wanru in Jiangzhou. She said that Qin Wanru and Qi Tianyu had a secret relationship but hid it from her, his sister. Fortunately, this matter was discovered by Qin Wanru's servant girl, Qing Chui. Qin Wanru's parents had wanted to arrange a marriage between Qi Tianyu and Qin Wanru, but Qin Wanru had an affair with the second young master of Magistrate Qi's family. Magistrate Qi was angry and they did not agree to this marriage. It was also said that Qi Tianyu's sister, Qi Rongji, did not know the truth and thought that Qin Yuru was stirring up trouble. She even poured a bowl of hot porridge on Qin Wanru's face and hand, so that Qin Wanru's hand was burned. Chapter 43. First Miss has gone too far. It's her own business, but she viciously pushed all the blame onto you. And Qing Chui is also First Miss's woman. Qing Yu said angrily. Miss, let's go tell the general and old grandma. It's useless. Qin Wanru looked down and smiled gently. She folded the letter in her hand and said, Qin Yuru didn't write this letter. Her hand is injured. Qin Yuru couldn't write at all. It was her right hand that was injured. If it's not her, who wrote it? Qing Chui was stunned and said in surprise. It should be written by Madame D. It's so detailed. Qin Wanru said calmly. It didn't seem like Qin Yuru, who was seriously injured, could write such a detailed letter. How could Madame write such a letter? Qing Yu said with a red face. If she didn't see it wrong, the beginning part was written in First Miss's opinion. She was very intimate with the heir. As an elder, how could Madame write such infuriating words? No one found out. She doesn't have to worry. Anyway, Qin Yuru will admit that she wrote it. Qin Wanru smiled and put down the letter. She picked up the teacup and took a sip. Her eyes fell calmly on the slightly rippling water. If I show this letter to my father, as long as Qin Yuru insists that she didn't write it, no one can do anything to her. You can say it was written by Madame. Qin Yu said anxiously. Madame's handwriting is slightly different from usual. She wrote it in the most formal way. Even if you say it was written by her, she can deny it. Qin Wanru said coldly. She was such a petite girl, but she sat by the window with coldness and contempt. If it was so easy to make Madame admit her guilt, there wouldn't be so many ghosts in this mansion. Her words were extremely cold. She was such a weak girl, but she used such a disobedient and cold tone to talk about the backyard. It made people feel inexplicably scared. Then what should we do? Qing Yu stammered. Let's spread the rumor that someone picked up a letter. Qin Wanru smiled calmly. The sun shone in through the window, making her face half bright and half dark. Qin Wanru looked different from her age. Under her long eyelashes was a pair of clear black and white eyes. She looked harmless and delicate, with a natural charm that other girls didn't have. But this made Qingyu inexplicably frightened and she couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva. The miss in front of her was still the miss of her family, but she seemed to have changed a lot. It was not her face, but her temperament. But this temperament made Qingyu feel safe in danger. Her miss had really changed, but this kind of change made Qingyu feel at ease. Too many things had happened these days, and each of them almost caused her miss's death. If her miss was still the same miss, she didn't know what would happen to her at this time. The strong preyed on the weak. Since the young mistress had become strong, how could she, as a maid, fall behind? Yes, miss, I will pretend to say it accidentally later. Qingyu nodded her head firmly. She wanted to protect Miss, and she would protect Mississippi. Qin Wanru nodded. She stood up and put the letter in her sleeve. She had to send the letter to Shui Rulan. It was a good bargaining chip. Qingyu nodded. She stood up and put the letter in her sleeve. She had to send the letter to Shui Rulan. It was a good bargaining chip. Qingyu answered and followed Qin Wanru to the family temple. Qianghua saw them coming and hurriedly welcomed them in. Shui Rulan was still sitting on the rush cushion in plain clothes. She didn't stand up when she saw Qin Wanru coming in. Qin Wanru took a rush cushion and sat down. Aunt Shui, did my mother come to you? Shui Rulan shook her head and her eyes became cold. Since she knew it was Madame D who ruined her innocence and the purpose was to make Qin Huayong feel guilty and stop caring about her and Qin Yuru's plan to frame Qin Wanru, Shui Rulan had already overthrown her previous idea. No one wanted to be stepped into the mud. The reason why she didn't take action now was Qin Wanru's order. My father may come today. You. Qin Wanru said with a serious face. Aunt Shui, I know you don't think much about my father in the past. But now, if no one can fight against my mother, my grandmother, Aunt Shui, and I, will not have a good end. Wanru, don't worry. I know. Shui Rulan understood what she meant. She reached out to hold Qin Wanru in her arms and said with distress. The little girl in her arms was really young. She was just a child who hadn't grown up. But she had to help her plan. If she wasn't forced to do so, such a little girl should be acting like a spoiled child in her biological mother's arms at this time. Wanru, don't worry. I know what to do. Shui Rulan didn't want to fight before. But now she knew she had to fight. She was not completely helpless. Madame D was vicious and wanted to destroy her and Wanru. She wouldn't let Madame D plot against her in vain. Aunt Shui, this letter is for you. You can read it first. When my mother comes to ask you for it, she can give in. But it is not enough to prove that it is written by Big Sister. Qin Wanru leaned in Shui Rulan's arms, took out the letter from her sleeve, and said meaningfully. I know. Shui Rulan took the letter and looked at it for a few times. She took a deep breath and nodded. She understood. Her eyes became cold and slightly lowered. Qin Wanru leaned in Shui Rulan's arms for a long time. Finally, she straightened up from Shui Rulan's arms. With a faint smile on her lips, she said softly, Aunt Shui should be fine. Grandma should be fine. Everyone should be fine. Her words almost made Shui Rulan cry. She nodded hard, pinched Qin Wanru's hand, and bit her lip. Qin Wanru stood up and wiped the tears on the corners of her eyes. She turned around and left with Qingyu. She came here specially to tell Shui Rulan before her father came and send this letter to Shui Rulan. It couldn't be used as evidence, but it could be used as a handle. Since Qin Huayong directly went back to the study and slapped Madame D because of what happened today, he naturally had a lot on his mind at this time. He probably wanted to find someone to talk to. Qin Wanru was a little girl and it was not suitable for her to talk. Grandma was too sick to talk now. The other two concubines used to be servant girls and didn't know much. The only one left was Shui Rulan. Moreover, she had told her father before that Shui Rulan was also interested in him. Her father would definitely come to talk to Shui Rulan. This was the first reason. Madame D had never been beaten before. This beating would definitely make her anxious. Moreover, there was the matter of the letter. This was the second reason. With the two-pronged approach, Madame D would definitely not be able to sit still. She would panic, and the more panicked she was, the more likely she would make mistakes. A cornered dog would do something desperate at a time like this. Qin Huaiyong was very annoyed. He was so annoyed that he couldn't even look at the file at hand. Previously, the matter of Qin Yuru was finally solved. Although there was a grudge between them, at least they maintained politeness on the surface. In particular, he repeatedly said that he would definitely compensate Magistrate Qi. If he went to the capital city, he would do his best to help Magistrate Qi to be transferred to the capital city. Finally, the matter of Qin Yuru was settled. Unexpectedly, just after this matter was settled, Madame D and Qin Yuru actually quarreled with Qi Rongji and Madame Li, the wife of Magistrate Qi. This time, it was also a big deal. Almost all the officials in Jiangzhou Prefecture knew about it. Magistrate Qi's eldest daughter also became famous along with his eldest daughter. Magistrate Qi, who was originally dissatisfied with the previous marriage, was really angry now. He sent someone to ask him to control his wife and daughter. To let them know what should be said and what should not be said. Qin Huaiyong didn't know what Madame D was thinking. When he thought that Qi Rongji was invited by Madame D, he was even more angry. Why did she invite Qi Rongji for no reason? If she didn't want to treat her well, she shouldn't have invited her back. Now that things had become like this, both families felt ashamed. Taking a deep breath, Qin Huaiyong stood up. At this time, he didn't even have the mood to eat dinner. He walked out with his hands clasped behind his back. He walked casually in his mansion, only feeling that his chest was stuffy, as if something heavy was pressing on his heart. It was an important moment for him to be transferred back to the capital city, but such a thing happened. How could he calm down? Seeing him frowning, the servant didn't dare to say anything. He only followed behind him and waited on him carefully. After walking for a while, Qin Huaiyong stood in front of the small yard in front of him. He didn't know how he came to the family temple. At this time, standing at the door, he didn't know whether he should enter or not. After the accident, Shui Rulan invited herself to the family temple. Until now, he was too ashamed to see her. Originally, he wanted to ask old grandma to help solve this matter, but now old grandma was also sick, so he couldn't mention this matter for the time being. But this matter had to be solved, and he actually didn't want Shui Rulan to suffer. Standing at the door of the family temple, he didn't know whether to enter or retreat. With his hands clasped behind his back, he looked at the curling fragrance wafting out of the yard of the family temple. He felt that this was actually not the right time. He hadn't figured out what to do now. Sighing, Qin Huaiyong shook his head helplessly. He turned around and wanted to leave. This matter was also very difficult to solve. Cousin. A soft voice came behind him, making his body shake violently. He turned around and was stunned to see Shui Rulan coming to the door with her maid Xianghua. Shui Rulan, who only wore a simple plain dress, looked at him with slightly red eyes. She was a little excited and a little flustered. But even so, she still walked out of the family temple and stopped Qin Huaiyong. What it meant to take this step, both of them knew. Cousin, you. Qin Huaiyong found that he seemed to have a lot of words to say, but he couldn't say anything at the moment. Cousin, you, are you here to see me? Shui Rulan lowered her head, bit her lips, and said uneasily. She rubbed the handkerchief in her hand in a panic. This was her habit. Qin Huaiyong had been paying attention to her, so he naturally knew it. Yes, I'm here to see you. Don't live here. Qin Huaiyong's voice involuntarily softened. If Madame D really schemed against her, she was the most innocent one. If I don't live here, where should I live? Shui Rulan said gloomily, but she didn't blame Qin Huayong. She lowered her head slightly, and her petite body looked a little cold in the night. Qin Huayong felt distressed and sad. He subconsciously reached out to help her. Cousin, don't worry. I will definitely give you an explanation. Now you go back to your yard first. After all, it's too cold here. You are not in good health. Living here is not good for your health. Cousin, I believe you, but can I go back after staying for another 2 days? Shui Rulan raised her head slightly and said softly, I don't know why it's like this. Chapter 44. Cousin, I'll wait for Auntie to get better. Shui Rulan struggled hard with her hands and looked at Qin Huayong tenderly. She didn't ask for much and only asked him to take care of old grandma's health. Qin Huayong was shocked. Old grandma was ill and seriously ill. She didn't get sick at this time in the past, but she suddenly got sick at this time. When he went to visit old grandma, he asked Nanny Duan and said that only the youngest daughter came to visit old grandma recently. Madame D and Qin Yuru didn't go to see her. Although old grandma was not his biological mother, she brought him up with hardships. His father died early. From this point of view, old grandma was like his biological mother. No one could replace the relationship between mother and son. He understood the meaning of Shui Rulan's words and was very moved. He took a deep look at Shui Rulan, relaxed his hand, nodded and said solemnly, Okay, I got it. Then you go back in 2 days. Qin Yuru hurt her hand now and had a bad temper. She couldn't sleep at night and asked people to get some food from the kitchen. Mei Yan, her maid, did not dare to neglect. She hurried to the kitchen with a lantern in her hand. This was the 10th time she had gone to the kitchen today, but she did not dare to ignore it. Just now, Mei Shui was slapped hard in the face because she was a little slow in picking up a vase. As Qin Yuru's personal maid, she knew that First Miss only showed gentleness and coquettishness outside. It's a letter. I heard that it's a letter from First Miss to the heir of Duke Yong. The letter is really. If someone sees this letter, First Miss will still have the face to go out. The laughter was very light, but because it was quiet at this time, people could still hear it clearly through the wall. Mei Yan was stunned and hurriedly hid behind the wall. Yes, that letter was picked up by Qianghua. If it is shown to the general, not only First Miss, but also Madam will be too ashamed to go out. Another voice, which sounded like two maids' voice, teased. Mei Yan's expression changed greatly. She picked up the lantern in her hand and looked at the high walls around her. She turned around and turned to the right. There was a moon cave door there. She wanted to find the 2 gossiping maids. Only a few close servants of Madam and a few close servants of eldest Miss knew about the letter, but the voice she heard just now was more like that of an ordinary maid. Why did someone else know that Miss and Madam wrote a letter and why Qianghua found it? Thinking of what might happen next, Mei Yan was so nervous that she trembled all over. She hurriedly turned around the wall, only to find that there was no one outside. She stood still and thought for a while. She couldn't be bothered to go to the kitchen anymore. She anxiously went back. Mei Yan, did you bring the dessert back so soon? As soon as she arrived at the door of the room, she met Mei Shui, who was coming out from inside. Mei Shui's face was swollen, and it was obvious that she had been beaten. This made Mei Yan feel very bitter. They were the principal maids of Qin Yuru. In the past, only others respected them, and no one laughed at them. With such marks, Mei Shui was too ashamed to go out, and so was she. Is Miss asleep? Mei Yan asked in a low voice. Not yet. Mei Shui shook her head bitterly, and her eyes fell on the side of Mei Yan's hand. Seeing that there was nothing there, her face changed greatly, and she warned her, Mei Yan, if you go in like this, you will, I'm in a hurry. Mei Yan interrupted Mei Shui in a low voice, and then hurriedly lifted the curtain to enter the room. She turned around the outer room and came to the inner room. Qin Yuru was sitting under the lamp. Hearing the sound, she raised her head with cold eyes. Seeing Mei Yan coming in empty-handed, a trace of hostility flashed in her eyes. She picked up the teacup on the table and fiercely smashed it on Mei Yan's face. In the past, she would still care about her reputation. Even when she was angry and hit the maid, she would use a dark way. There was a long needle in the sewing basket, which was not used for embroidery, but for stabbing people. The maid's hands and arms were full of wounds, but outsiders couldn't see it. Mei Yan, who had been prepared, dodged the teacup coming at her face. It didn't hit her face, but broke at her feet. "Kneel down," Qin Yuru said coldly and harshly. Her face was covered with ointment. The color of the ointment was green, and it looked like there were green stars on it, which made her eyebrows and eyes look a little green under the lamp. The ointment was soft and greasy, and her beautiful face actually made people feel disgusted at this time. "Miss." Looking at the broken pieces of porcelain at her feet, Mei Yan begged. "You dislike the broken porcelain on the ground? If you don't want to kneel down, I'll ask someone to sell you to that cheap place tomorrow. Let's see if you still dare to dislike it." Qin Yuru sneered gloomily. "Miss, I have something important to report." Mei Yan didn't dare to hesitate anymore. She had seen her excellent reputation, first miss do such things in private more than once. She knelt down with her legs weak. Immediately, there were broken porcelain pieces piercing into her legs, and her face immediately turned pale with pain. "What's the matter?" Seeing the blood rippling at Mei Yan's feet, Qin Yuru felt much better and asked coldly. "Just now when I went to the kitchen, to get some snacks, I heard, 2 servant girls across the wall, saying that Xianghua, who serves Miss Shui, picked up the letter you wrote to the heir of Duke Yong." Mei Yan had to concentrate on reporting because of the piercing pain on her legs. Beads of cold sweat came out of her forehead. "What, lost the letter? Tell me clearly." Qin Yuru suddenly stood up, and her face changed greatly. She had no time to punish Mei Yan viciously, and said to Mei Shui who followed in, "Let her get up." Mei Shui obeyed and hurriedly helped Mei Yan up, who was trembling. "Miss, I heard, someone said so, and I hurriedly turned around, but I didn't see anyone. It should be 2 servant girls passing by. I don't know if what they said is true." Mei Yan stood up with the help of Mei Shui. After the sharp pain faded a little, she calmed down and said. But she didn't dare to take the responsibility, and could only say that she didn't know if it was true. In fact, the 2 servant girls said very clearly that if they didn't see it, they wouldn't know. Qin Yuru gritted her teeth, and her face turned pale. "Go and ask my mother to come here." Mei Shui answered and hurriedly left. Mei Yan carefully retreated to the side, holding the wall. Her legs were still bleeding, but she didn't dare to move at all. Madame D came quickly. Hearing that Qin Yuru's letter fell into the hands of Shui Rulan, she hurriedly ran over with Nanny Zhou even though she didn't want to see anyone at this time. "Why did you come back?" As soon as she entered the door, Madame D asked directly, and one side of her face was also swollen. "What did you do this time?" "Mother, you sent someone to deliver the letter." "Why did I cause trouble again?" Qin Yuru was unhappy and said angrily. "I sent someone to deliver the letter, and then I directly sent someone to the capital city. How could I let someone pick up the letter?" Madame D sat down on the chair irritably. "Tell me what happened on Earth." Things happened one after another, and Madame D didn't know how to deal with them. "Say it," Qin Yuru said to Mei Yan coldly. "Madam, I heard it when I went to the kitchen to get the snacks for First Mississippi. It was 2 servant girls who said it. But when I turned around the wall, the 2 servant girls had already left, so I don't know whether it's true or not." Mei Yan lowered her head and murmured. She suddenly felt that she was meddlesome at this time. "What a useless woman," Madame D said angrily. She reached out to rub her eyebrows and took a deep breath. He took a deep breath and suppressed the impatience in his heart. "Mother, what should we do now? If Shui Rulan gives this letter to father. What should I do? Qin Yuru said in a panic. Don't worry. I will go to Shui Rulan tomorrow. Even if the letter is true, you can't be blamed. Madame D pinched her hands, stood up again, and said coldly after walking a few circles on the spot. This reminded Qin Yuru. She thought for a while and calmed down. She raised her injured right hand and said proudly, yes, my hand is injured now, so it's impossible for me to write a letter. Even if Shui Rulan says I wrote it, I can still insist that she forged it herself. The letter was written by Madame D. Although Madame D changed her handwriting, it couldn't guarantee that Qin Huayong wouldn't doubt it. If this happened in the past, Madame D could rest easy. Touching the dull pain on her face, Madame D had made up her mind that she must not let Qin Huayong see this letter. Even if it was just a little doubt, it couldn't be allowed. Mother, can you blame it on Qin Wanru? Qin Yuru hated Qin Wanru now. She gritted her teeth and said with hatred. A bit of malice flashed in her eyes. She always felt that all this had something to do with Qin Wanru. We can't blame it on her. Madame D frowned and said impatiently. This matter was very difficult to handle now. It was good enough that they could handle it clearly. How could they have the energy to blame it on Qin Wanru? Mother, it's all Qin Wanru's fault. If she didn't smash the bridal sedan chair and didn't let Qi Tianyu see those letters in my room, such a thing wouldn't have happened. That bitch, I won't spare her. Qin Wanru gnashed her teeth and said with a cold face. This was completely putting all the blame on Qin Wanru, as if she was innocent. Yuru, she is just a little girl now, and her future marriage is in my hands. Your future is limitless, how can you go against this bitch? She is just a piece of rubble, while you are a piece of jewelry. What you need to do now is to make friends with her. This is the situation in Jiangzhou, but in the capital city, everything can be planned. Madame D raised her head, and her cold eyes fell on Qin Yuru's face. She scolded her sternly. But, mother, now that I have been harmed by her, I can't accept it. Qin Yuru said with a ferocious face. Chapter 45. Madame D went to the family temple to look for Shui Rulan the next day. Madame D and Shui Rulan hadn't seen each other since that incident. She didn't have to come here to humiliate Shui Rulan at the right time, but now she had to come here. Cousin, how have you been these days? When Madame D entered the room, she gently covered her mouth with a handkerchief and smiled. After covering her face with ice last night, the redness and swelling on her face were almost gone. After covering her face with rouge and face powder, no one could tell that she had been slapped yesterday at all. Not bad. Shui Rulan was prepared and said lightly. She looked at Madame D calmly with her dark eyes. Madame D looked at Shui Rulan's fair and tender face with some jealousy. Shui Rulan looked very young in white clothes. Although her eyes were light, they revealed a sense of elegance. In the past, she didn't like Shui Rulan's seemingly elegant and peaceful manner. She felt that Shui Rulan, a widow, could be so peaceful and seemed to be heartless. At this time, when she thought of Qin Huayong's action in the study that day, she immediately felt like digging out her heart and lungs. That thing was obviously her plan, but she felt that Shui Rulan deliberately made her feel that she was not interested in Qin Huayong. Cousin has lost a lot of weight these days. What happened that day was all the general's fault. The general said that cousin should be given an explanation, and there should be a place for cousin in this mansion. Madame D secretly clenched her fists and then put them down. Then she sat on the chair, covered her nose with a handkerchief and said hypocritically. The so-called "a place in the backyard," of course, meant that Shui Rulan would be a concubine, and she said it reluctantly. Madame D thought viciously in her heart. So what if the general cared about her? She was just a concubine, and she could bear it. As the mistress of the family, she had many ways to punish a concubine. The old lady could not even protect herself now. If she wanted to kill a concubine, she could do it easily. Madam, I don't want to be a concubine. Shui Rulin put down the incense in her hand, raised her eyes and looked at Madame D. Hearing this, not only Madame D, but also Nanny Zhou, who was standing behind her, could not help being stunned. Madame D was shocked and her face darkened. Cousin, what do you mean? Do you want me to give up my position to you? Don't you have to give me an explanation for this? I was perfectly fine in my own courtyard, but something like this happened. Could it be that I planned this? Shui Rulin raised her head and said in a cold voice, it's not difficult to get all the servants here and find out what happened here. We can let Magistrate Qi's wife help us investigate, and everyone can avoid arousing suspicion. Let Madame Li help investigate. Madame D was so angry that her face turned green. She did not expect that Shui Rulin, who had always looked delicate, would be so fierce. She frowned tightly and her eyes almost looked like a hook. Shui Rulin, you are so considerate. Madame D gritted her teeth and said, aren't you afraid that the wind will hurt your tongue? I am not afraid of the wind, but I am afraid that I have been set up. Originally, I just wanted to spend some time with my aunt, and I did not want to get involved. But now that I am involved, I don't want to escape anymore. Shui Rulin glanced at Madame D and casually patted the ashes on her sleeves. Madame D gritted her teeth. Today, she came to give Shui Rulin a show of strength, but she did not expect that Shui Rulin would be so stubborn. She put her hand on the table and was about to slap the table and stand up. She did not believe that she could not deal with Shui Rulin, who had no status. She glanced at Shui Rulin and suddenly fell on the corner of a familiar envelope on Shui Rulin's sleeve. Her heart beat wildly. Such a familiar envelope was Qin Yuru's letter. The reason why this envelope was so familiar was that it was she who put the envelope into it. Madame D suppressed the anger in her heart and sneered. She softened her voice and said, Shui Rulin, you are a widow. As a widow, do you want to climb over others? Madame D, do you mean that the person who has plotted against you can't sit still in her position? If I tell cousin everything, it's not hard to imagine what cousin will do. Shui Rulin refused to give in and then slowly flicked her cuffs. The letter hidden in her sleeve also made a sound. She used to call Madame D as her cousin-in-law, but now she only called her Madame. Shui Rulin, you don't think that a letter can explain everything, do you? Madame D sneered, and her sharp eyes fell on Shui Rulin's sleeve. She secretly clenched her fists and then slowly loosened them. Shui Rulin, let's make a deal. If possible, she did not want Qin Huayong to see this letter. Let's not make a deal. I still want to be frank with cousin. I don't want to hide anything from him. Shui Rulin said. Shui Rulin, don't go too far. Madame D suddenly stood up and said sternly. It's not me who goes too far. I just want to take back what belongs to me. Since I was set up and trampled by others, I will seek justice for myself even if I have to risk my life, Shui Rulin said coldly. She used to have no desire, but it did not mean that she was easy to bully. Hearing Shui Rulin's sharp words, Madame D couldn't help feeling a little guilty, but she still said fiercely, Shui Rulin, I don't know whether you were plotted against or not, but it is a fact that the general was plotted against. The general used to treat you as a relative who was raised at home. He raised you out of kindness, but he didn't expect that you would become his enemy. Let's go and talk to cousin. Shui Rulin was very calm. After Madame D finished speaking, she turned around and walked out. Shui Rulin, don't force me. Madame D said sternly. She waved her hand and several old maids she brought blocked the door of the family temple. Shui Rulin turned back and looked at Madame D's lips. She showed a scornful smile and said unhurriedly, are you going to use force, Madame D? Do you really think that I am so stupid to hide a real letter with me? This is fake. Madame D almost said this with her teeth clenched. Do you really think that I am so stupid? I have been set up once, will I be set up again? Shui Rulan smiled and said lightly. Looking at her calm look, Madame D was not sure. She looked at Shui Rulan suspiciously and then slowly fell on her cuff. You can take this letter. After you leave, I'll go to my cousin and let him judge for me. You brought people to snatch my letter in such an aggressive manner. It's obvious that you have a guilty conscience. When my cousin sees my real letter, he'll definitely believe my story. Shui Rulan said with a calm look. Madame D was so angry that she almost fell down. Did she want her to confess without being pressed? What do you want? Shui Rulan said irritably. She almost spat out these words with her teeth clenched. With so many people taking action, General could definitely find out the truth if he wanted to. I don't want to be a concubine. Shui Rulan looked at Madame D coldly and repeated again, Madame D, please go back before the problem is solved. I will leave the family temple in 2 days and I have to take care of my aunt. I can't really stay in the family temple for the rest of my life. You. Her calm words irritated Madame D again. She clenched her handkerchief fiercely and wanted to tear Shui Rulan's beautiful face. How could she say such words? She not only used Qin Huayong to suppress her, but also used the old woman to talk about it. Madame D had been married to Qin Huayong for so many years and had always been domineering. She had never been so aggrieved. Madame D, please go back. Shui Rulan took 2 steps forward, picked up a few sticks of incense placed on the side of the censer, lit them up and slowly inserted them into the censer, showing that Madame D would not leave even if she wanted to. Go. Knowing that she could not do anything to Shui Rulan now, Madame D gritted her teeth and said with hatred. Then she turned around and walked out. Madam, what should we do? Nanny Zhou hurried 2 steps and said anxiously. I will never agree. Madame D gritted her teeth and said. But the letter. Nanny Zhou reminded her. It was not easy to explain the letter in Shui Rulan's hand, even though the handwriting on it was not like that of Madame D's daily use. If the general suspects this, Madam, what you have said before will be dug out, Nanny Zhou said. Madame D had done a lot of things behind Qin Huayong's back. In any case, we can't let the general believe this letter and Shui Rulan. Madame D gritted her teeth and said. Madam, why don't we find someone to take the blame? Even if Cousin Miss reported this to the general will not suspect us if someone takes the blame. Nanny Zhou suggested. Her words shocked Madame D and immediately her eyes brightened. This was a good idea. Who should we find to take the blame? Second Miss. Nanny Zhou said and pointed to the direction of Qin Wanru's yard. As long as we put this matter on Second Miss, we can shirk all the responsibility. We can say that Second Miss framed First Miss, deliberately wrote such a disgusting letter, and then deliberately threw it on the road for others to pick up. Nanny Zhou was used to letting Qin Wanru take the blame, so she subconsciously put the blame on Qin Wanru. Will the general suspect? Madame D was also moved. Seeing that Madame D was moved, Nanny Zhou hurriedly said, of course the general will believe it. Think about it, First Miss and Second Miss are not on good terms now. Second Miss also knows that her biological mother is not you. She hates you for hiding this, so she deliberately came up with a way to frame First Mississippi. In the past, Madame D liked to hear this kind of talk the most. Nanny Zhou was Madame D's confidant, so she certainly knew what to say at this time. Sure enough, after thinking about it, Madame D nodded. Her eyes were full of gloominess and complacency. Okay, but we can't lead the blame. We have to let someone else do it. Madam, what do you mean? Nanny Zhou waved her hand and the other old maids all stepped back. Then she approached Madame D and asked in a low voice. Write another letter. Madame D sneered. Chapter 46. Qing Chui, what's that in your hand? Qin Wanru put down her medical book and asked with clear eyes. Qin Wanru's words did not come naturally. Qing Chui was stunned for a moment before she hurriedly said, "Second miss, it's more important who the letter belongs to." "I picked up a letter." "Did you throw it away?" "I saw you writing a letter just now." "I didn't ask anyone to get snacks, did I?" Qin Wanru ignored her and asked Qing Yu. "Miss doesn't need snacks after lunch. This is her usual nap time." Qing Yu looked up at Qing Chui and asked bluntly, "Qing Chui, you're Mrs.'s personal maid. Don't tell me you don't know Mrs.'s habits. Did you purposely go to get snacks or a letter?" "Qing Yu, what do you mean by that? Are you saying that I came here because I wanted snacks?" Qing Chui's face turned red and she said angrily to Qing Yu, "I don't know if you wanted snacks, but I do know that Miss didn't want them." Qing Yu said calmly, "I was worried that you might be hungry, so I made a trip to the kitchen. I found that they had freshly made pastries, so I brought some for you. As a servant, shouldn't I pay attention to things that you're not aware of?" Qing Chui stammered. She rolled her eyes and said indignantly, "Pay attention to things that I didn't notice? Is this letter the same?" Qin Wanru asked calmly, "I didn't ask you to serve me in the room since you came back. How did you see me writing a letter?" "Miss, there are no other masters nearby. If it's not Mrs.'s letter, then who else could it be?" Qing Chui was a little flustered but she remembered Madame D's instructions. She gritted her teeth and said, "There are no other masters around, so you're sure that it was me? If someone died at this time, would you also say that there was no one else and that it was definitely me, the master, who did it?" Qin Wanru sneered and looked at Qing Chui coldly. "What a ruthless girl. You're trying to throw all the blame on me." "Miss, I..." Qing Chui had never seen Qin Wanru act so fiercely before. Although Qin Wanru was young, the hostility in Qin Wanru's eyes made Qing Chui panic. She subconsciously avoided looking into Qin Wanru's eyes. Qin Wanru's eyes seemed to contain a sharp blade, unlike second Miss Innocent big eyes. "Why aren't you kneeling?" Qing Yu came over and gave Qing Chui's leg a hard kick. Qing Chui staggered 2 steps and knelt down with a thud. "Qing Yu, how dare you kick me?" Qing Chui was enraged. She glared at Qing Chui, wanting to stand up and grab Qing Yu. They were both second Miss personal maids, but Qing Chui had always been more respected than Qing Yu. When Granny Fang was still around, Qing Chui was Granny Fang's most valued subordinate. "Why wouldn't I dare to kick you? You just took a letter and you dare to frame Miss." Qing Yu cleverly jumped behind Qing Chui and gave her another hard kick. Qing Chui, who had just stood up, was kicked so hard that she knelt down again. This time, Qing Chui knelt even harder than the previous time. Her knees hit the ground with a loud thud, and Qing Chui screamed in pain. "Nanny Yu, go and ask mother to come over," Qin Wanru said coldly and calmly. Nanny Yu, who was standing at the side, was already prepared. She walked out and waved her hand to signal a maid to go and ask Madame D to come over. After the maid left, Nanny Yu called another maid who looked more honest and asked her to go to the study outside to get Qin Huayong. The 2 maids left one after another. The maid in front did not know that the other maid had gone to get Qin Huayong. "Qing Chui, don't you feel wronged?" Qin Wanru said slowly as she looked at the furious Qing Chui. "Miss, what is this bitch Qing Yu trying to do? I'll beat her to death." Qing Chui did not dare to confront Qin Wanru directly, so she turned to Qing Yu and gritted her teeth. She glared at Qing Yu and tried to get up again. "Kneel down," Qin Wanru said coldly, as if she was trying to take sides. Qing Chui was so angry that she lost her mind. Her eyes were about to burst into flames and she said indignantly, "Second Miss, why should I kneel down?" "Because I'm your master," Qin Wanru said coldly. Her eyes fell on the letter that Qing Chui had accidentally thrown out. The envelope was the one that was addressed to the heir of Duke Yong. It was exactly the same. Qin Wanru's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. Madame D was indeed panicking. She was planning to use the same trick again and push the blame onto Qin Wanru. Miss, you're not a good master at all. How can you be so biased? It was Qin Yu who hit me. Why should I kneel instead of Qin Yu? Qing Chui was so angry that her eyes were red. She shouted loudly, indignant. When the maids and old maids outside the door heard the noise inside, they put down their work and quietly leaned toward the door or the window to listen to the commotion. Some even stood in groups of 3 to 5 and pointed at the yard. It did not look like the yard of a young lady from an aristocratic family, but more like the crowd in the market. Am I biased as a master? Qin Wanru withdrew her gaze from the window and smiled. Then, her eyes suddenly turned cold. Since you think I'm biased, then I'll be more biased. Qin Yu, teach her a lesson. Let her know who the real master of this yard is. Yes, miss. Qin Yu answered crisply. She reached out and pressed Qing Chui's head down hard. Apologize to miss now. Qing Chui did not expect Qin Yu to really attack her. She struggled angrily and reached out to grab Qin Yu. Unfortunately, Qin Yu was standing at a very tricky angle. She could not grab onto Qin Yu's back. After Qin Yu pressed down on her head a few times, Qing Chui felt dizzy. She tried to grab the air but failed to grab Qin Yu's hand. She was so angry that she almost went crazy. She scolded, Qin Yu, you bitch, how dare you? Why wouldn't I dare? Why wouldn't I dare to do anything to a maid who dares to frame miss? Qin Yu stood behind Qing Chui and sneered. You bitch, I'm going to tear you apart. Qing Chui felt dizzy from being pressed down. She could only see the shadows in front of her and could not see clearly who was in front of her. She reached out and pointed at Qin Wanru. Her finger was not pointing at Qin Yu, but at Qin Wanru. You're offending your superior. Slap her. Qin Wanru had been waiting for this opportunity and immediately scolded. Nanny Yu, who was standing at the side, walked over and gave Qing Chui 4 tight slaps on her face. Bitch, you. Qing Chui did not see clearly who it was. She was slapped a few more times and could only taste a metallic taste in her throat. There was a commotion outside the window and the door. The maids and old maids outside were shocked that Qing Chui dared to scold their mistress. What's going on? A displeased voice came from behind them. The people at the door quickly moved away. Madame D appeared at the door with a calm smile on her face. She had arrived very quickly. Madam, save me. Madam, save me. Second miss is going to beat me to death. Save me. Qing Chui screamed when she heard the familiar voice. Wanru, how did a maid like you end up like this? Madame D's gaze fell on Qing Chui. Qing Chui looked extremely disheveled. Her hair was messy and her face was red and swollen. Madame D felt pain in her face when she saw the 2 red patches on her face. She must have used a lot of force. Madam, second miss is going to beat me to death just because she picked up a letter from second Mississippi. Madam, please save me. Hearing Madame D's words, Qing Chui became even more confident. She cried out loud and tears rolled down her cheeks. She wiped her tears as she cried. How could such a thing happen? Wanru, what letter is this? Madame D was shocked and turned to look at Qin Wanru. Mother, this maid was scolding me just now. How dare a maid do such a thing? Mother, do you still believe what she said? Qin Wanru said calmly. Madam, don't listen to second Mississippi. I was scolding that bitch Qin Yu, not second Mississippi. Second miss is purposely speaking up for Qin Yu. Qing Chui cried out loudly. Wanru, how could a maid scold you? Madame D chuckled and said in a gentle voice, are you being naughty again? Girl, how old are you? How could you do such a thing? Although it's a small matter, it's still a human life. How could you say whatever you want about her? How could a family like us do such a vicious thing? She sounded like she was trying to persuade Qin Wanru, but the meaning behind her words was extremely vicious. She was pushing all the blame to Qin Wanru, saying that Qin Wanru was punishing a maid viciously and helping another favored maid. The servants outside the window looked at everything that was happening in the room with a mocking smile on their faces. Needless to say, Second Miss was going to be scolded by Madam again this time. In the past, Madam had scolded Second Miss many times. Why couldn't Second Miss learn to be obedient? How could an egg win against a stone? Mother, do you think I'm in the wrong? Hearing Madam D's words, Qin Wanru raised her head calmly and looked at Madam D's face with her eyebrows slightly raised. Child, you're always so capricious. Madam D said with a smile, stop fooling around. Let me see what letter you wrote. She was going to turn this matter over and put the blame on the letter. Mother, what do you mean? Do you think that my words are not as good as those of a maid whom mother trusts? Qin Wanru sneered and her words immediately became sharp. The smile on Madam D's face froze, and then she looked angry. She couldn't deal with Shui Rulan for the time being, but she could deal with a little girl who hadn't grown up yet. In front of so many servants, Qin Wanru didn't give her any face at all, which made her feel a little embarrassed. Wanru, I'm your mother. Will a mother hurt her own daughter? Madam D frowned and said unhappily. She blurted out these words, but when she finished, she felt a little embarrassed. In the past, she always claimed to be Qin Wanru's biological mother. Every time something happened, she would say such words first, which made Qin Wanru speechless. But now was not the past. Everyone knew that she was not Qin Wanru's biological mother. Under her long eyelashes, her eyes were deep. In her previous life, she was deceived by Madam D's seemingly heartfelt words, and finally stepped on the road to death step by step. Chapter 47. Hearing this, Madam D's face stiffened and she looked embarrassed. She had forgotten that Qin Wanru already knew that she was not Qin Wanru's biological mother. Mother, as soon as you came in, you listened to the servant girl and pushed all the blame to me. You didn't even notice that the servant girl deliberately led the people in the yard to watch the show, just to embarrass me. I'm afraid that my status in this yard is not as high as that of a servant girl. Don't you think it's strange, Mother? While Madam D was still in a daze, Qin Wanru looked up and continued. How would I know that the servants in your yard are so unruly? Madam D was flustered by the question and said angrily. Mother, you've been in charge of the backyard, so you've always been unaware of what happened in my yard? Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Madam D's face calmly, without a trace of surprise. It was as if this was all too common. Such a young child stood in the crowd, calmly looking at Madam D, who was a head taller than her. The servants around her whispered, and almost none of their words were good for her. This was the yard of a young lady, but now it looked like a wet market, a messy wet market, and Madam D, who had been in charge of the backyard, said that she didn't know. Qin Huayong suddenly felt that the scene in front of him was so glaring that he couldn't bear to watch it anymore. He glanced at his servant, who understood and loudly coughed, and said sternly, "The general is here." His words scared the servant girls and old maids who surrounded the door and window, and they hurriedly retreated to the sides. All of them fell silent, and the noise just now was gone. Qin Huayong looked at the servant girls and old maids, and then he strode into the room with his hands behind his back. Inside the room, Madam D felt that something was wrong. She didn't expect Qin Huayong to come when she was dealing with Qin Wanru. She quickly turned to look at Nanny Zhou, who gave her a calm look. General. Madam D calmed herself down and hurried forward with a smile. Qin Huayong didn't even look at her, and his eyes fell on Qing Chui, who was still kneeling on the ground. He had been standing outside the door for a while, and had roughly heard what happened. This servant girl was the main cause of the trouble. Qin Huayong had never cared about female servant girls. In the past, he would not pay attention to them. But now, when he looked up, he was even more furious. This servant girl was dressed much more gorgeously than the other servant girls. Not only did the material of her clothes look much more luxurious, but there were also earrings hanging from her ears, which made her look enchanting. A young lady from an aristocratic family actually had such an enchanting maid by her side. What would others think of their daughter? If a maid was like this, how could the young lady be any better? Is this the servant girl who was beaten and attracted the attention of the whole courtyard? Qin Huayong asked coldly. At this time, Qin Wanru also came to salute to Qin Huayong. After hearing the question, she nodded and pointed to a letter that fell on the ground. She said naturally, "Father, she is the servant girl who made trouble just now. I don't know where she picked up the letter. She said it was written by me without hesitation and insisted that there was no other master nearby, so she was sure that the letter must be mine. Give it to me." Qin Huayong's eyes fell on Madame D. Madame D was nervous, but she forced herself not to show the slightest change on her face. The final purpose of this letter was to be delivered to Qin Huayong, but not at this time. But she didn't dare to stop him at this time, and her hand that was holding the handkerchief tightened. The servant went to pick up the letter, and Qin Huayong reached out to take it. This was a sealed letter, and there was only the words, "To Master D," on the cover, and nothing else. The handwriting was very ordinary, and he couldn't tell who wrote it, but the strength of the writing was a little weak, so it should be the handwriting of a woman. The master of the inner courtyard could not address Child D in this way. It could not be Madame D, nor was it like Qin Yuru. Her mother was bedridden and could not write anything. Therefore, it seemed that it was written by Qin Wanru, who was not close to Madame D. On the surface, it looked like it. This is the letter that you believed was written by Wanru after listening to the servant girl's words? Qin Huayong raised his eyes coldly, and looked at Madame D ambiguously. "General, this servant girl said." Madame D stuttered, and no longer had the imposing manner that she used to insist on Qin Wanru. "This servant girl is your biological daughter. Why are you so protective of her?" Qin Huayong looked at Madame D coldly and reprimanded. General, how can you say that about me? Am I not dealing with something? It's just that I haven't dealt with it yet, and Wanru is blaming me again, so it's a mess." Madame D covered her face with her handkerchief and felt wronged. "Who arranged this servant girl to serve Wanru?" Qin Huayong asked. Madame D was shocked, and hurriedly said, This was chosen by Wanru herself, and she has served her for more than a year. After serving her for more than a year, she has become a mistress from a servant girl. Look at her clothes. I'm afraid that when she stands next to Wanru, people will think that Wanru is her little servant girl." Qin Huayong's eyes fell on Qin Wanru. The petite Qin Wanru only wore a jade white dress, and although it looked very good on her, it seemed a little too plain. Compared to this extremely enchanting servant girl, her master really looked like a little servant girl. But she chose this servant girl herself. Madame D shirked the responsibility. Of course, she would not say that she asked Nanny Fang to coax Qin Wanru to choose this servant girl, and that Qin Wanru was only 9 years old at that time, and it was easier to coax her. How old was she then? Qin Huayong's thick eyebrows knitted tightly. This question made Madame D unable to answer, and she twisted her handkerchief fiercely, and secretly gritted her teeth. If it wasn't for the general seeing this scene today, he would not have been so rude to her in front of all the servants. She already knows how to choose servants at such a young age. I remember that the old maid who was beaten to death was also your servant girl, right? Your servants are in charge of Wanru's courtyard, but in the end, you let a servant girl take charge, and it seems that no one in this courtyard treats Wanru as a master, and they are actually watching the scene while gossiping about the master. Could it be that these servants were also chosen by Wanru herself? Qin Huayong sneered. Things happened one after another, and at this time, how could he not see that Madame D did not have any mother-daughter feelings for Qin Wanru, and even did not care about Qin Wanru at all? Shangxin. In the past, when he said that he treated Qin Wanru as his biological daughter, it was just a lie. He had no other children, and even though Qin Wanru was not his biological daughter, he still treated her as his biological daughter. After raising her for a few years, he could be said to have developed feelings for her, especially when he recalled the scene when he was saved by that person. He only felt that he had let his old friend down. General, I am not very clear about these things. Hearing Qin Huayong's words, Madame D knew that the situation was not good, and hurriedly explained. You are the mistress of the inner court, and you actually do not know about this, then why do you still care about the inner court? Qin Huayong said mercilessly. General, I really don't know. Nanny Fong has always been very nice to me, and she said that everyone in this courtyard respects Wanru very much. Madame D said with tears in her eyes, and with a wronged look, she shirked the responsibility, and said that since Nanny Fong was already gone, it did not matter what she said. Then mother, do you know now? Qin Wanru did not intend to let Madame D go. I wonder if mother can spare some time to help manage this matter. The expression on Madame D's face stiffened, and she reluctantly looked at Qin Huayong's gloomy face, and had to reluctantly say, Wanru, rest assured, I will ask someone to replace all the disobedient servants in your courtyard, and you can pick some more yourself. This time, you must pick some servants who are obedient. Mother, rest assured, without Nanny Fong, this time I will definitely pick servants who are honest and know how to respect me, Qin Wanru said, raising her eyebrows. Obviously, Qin Huayong was saying that in the past, it was Nanny Fong who lured her to pick servants who did not know the rules, and Qin Huayong knew that Nanny Fong was Madame D's servant. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, Madame D's face darkened, but she did not dare to get angry, knowing that she had fallen into Qin Wanru's trap, or else there would not be such a coincidence. She secretly gritted her teeth, but showed a loving expression on her face. Wanru is so sensible, mother can rest assured. Mother, let's sell this maid. Qin Wanru ignored her loving words, and her eyes fell on Qing Chui calmly. I can't afford to use such a servant girl. Madam, save me, madam, save me. Qing Chui saw that Qin Huayong's eyes had also turned to look at her, and her face turned pale in panic, and she crawled towards Madame D while crying. She knew that things were not going well, and if she said anything, she would be exposed. Seeing that things were not going well, Nanny Zhou took a step forward and stood in front of Madame D, and reprimanded her sternly. You have angered second miss, you should be the one asking for help now. Our madam has always doted on second miss, and everything should be done according to second miss's wishes. There was a strong hint in her words, and Qing Chui immediately understood. She turned around and threw herself at Qin Wanru, and hugged one of her legs, begging, Second miss, I really only picked up a letter, and I thought that only second miss would address Child D like this in this mansion. Second miss, I really didn't do it on purpose, please don't sell me, I'm willing to work for you in the future. After saying that, she cried so hard that her voice could not be heard, and she even took a step back, loosened her grip, and knocked her head on the ground 3 times, causing a big swollen patch on her fair forehead. Miss, please don't sell me to that kind of place, I'm also the daughter of an innocent family, if second miss really sells me to that kind of place, I'll have no choice but to die. Looking at her heartbroken look, the servant girls and old maids outside all secretly looked at her with pity, thinking that Qin Wanru was too cruel. She was indeed Madame D's most capable servant, and Nanny Zhou's words immediately made people feel that she was cruel, and even made people feel that she was cruel and merciless, intending to make her father hate her from the bottom of his heart. Do you think that I'm the only one who would address him like this? Qin Wanru said coldly. Yes, I made a mistake, Second miss, please forgive me. Qing Chui cried loudly, Second mistress, I brought the letter to you as soon as I found it. I assumed that you were the one who threw the letter. It's all my fault, I really don't know anything. As she cried, she peeked at Nanny Zhou's face, and when she saw a smile on Nanny Zhou's face, she felt relieved. She knew that in front of the general, even if second miss did not believe her, she could not really do anything to her, and after all, she had good intentions. She immediately felt proud of herself, but Qin Wanru's next words scared her so much that her lips immediately turned pale. Chapter 48. Qing Chui was illiterate and many people knew that even if she had picked up the letter, she would not have known who it was written to. Everyone had been arguing for a long time, but because Qin Wanru had tried to divert the topic, no one had revealed who the letter was written to in front of everyone. But now, Qing Chui knew who it was. The only possibility was that Qing Chui already knew what was written in the letter. Who told her? Qing Chui looked at Madame D with a pale face. She was scared and her lips were trembling, but she could not find a reason to explain herself. How dare you? How did you know that this was a letter from second miss to child D? Who told you? Nanny Zhou suddenly shouted, as if she had just found out about it. But her words were secretly conveying information. Nanny Zhou's words immediately reminded Qing Chui. Her lips trembled and she was about to follow Nanny Zhou's train of thought to defend herself, but Qin Wanru interrupted her coldly. She looked at Nanny Zhou with an unfriendly expression and said, Nanny Zhou, Qing Chui is my maid. How could Nanny Zhou know everything she wants to say? Could it be that Nanny Zhou and Qing Chui are close? If they were close, they could have colluded. Wanru, what are you talking about? Nanny Zhou is asking her for you. Nanny Zhou could not answer Qin Wanru's harsh words. Madame D quickly coughed and forced a smile to help Nanny Zhou out of the situation. Qin Huayong's brows were knitted tightly together. He was a general and was used to a straightforward style. He had never paid attention to the affairs of the backyard. At this moment, he suddenly felt that he had neglected a lot of things, including Qin Wanru, Shui Rulan, and even old grandma. The people in front of him, be it Madame D or Nanny Zhou, seemed to be in a panic. Qin Wanru's words even sounded like she was trying to tear down the east wall to mend the west wall. Wanru, although you're still young, you're no longer a child. Don't be stubborn. Although Qingsui is not a good person, she doesn't deserve to die. It's not a benevolent master's way to convict her without saying anything. Madame D tried her best to persuade her. Qin Wanru's words made it sound as if Qin Wanru did not want to let Qing Chui go because Qin Wanru had a bad temper and was willful. Qin Wanru's words implied that Qin Wanru was unreasonable, which was not a good temperament. Her words were full of traps, and her purpose was to make Qin Huayong not like her. Who would like a willful and unreasonable child? Madame D's first plan failed, so she came up with a second plan. Was she going to sow discord? Looking at Madame D's face, Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. In her previous life, she was really naive, which was why she was plotted against by Madame D and walked step by step towards destruction. But in this life, she was destined to trample on Madame D. When Mother came, didn't she also condemn me without saying a word? Is Mother not a benevolent mother? Qin Wanru tilted her head slightly and asked in confusion. She was still young, so it was not out of place for her to act like this. In fact, she even looked like a little girl. Yes, she was just a child. How could a child be expected to understand so many twists and turns? Therefore, her words were unintentional. In contrast, Madame D and Nanny Zhou's words were full of provocation. Looking at Qin Wanru's childish actions, Qin Huayong felt a surge of bitterness in his heart. He felt very guilty and distressed. He reached out to touch Qin Wanru's hair and could not help but say softly, Wanru, you're a good child. Father will definitely seek justice for you. No matter what happened in the past or now, Qin Wanru was clearly an innocent child, and an innocent child who was bullied by her own servant girl. Thinking that in his own backyard, Qin Wanru's life was actually worse than that of a servant girl, Qin Huayong felt a surge of anger in his heart. He could not suppress it no matter how hard he tried. Have a good rest first. Your mother and I will discuss about changing the servant girl in your yard. In the future, there will be no servant girl who does not treat you as a Mississippi general. Madame D immediately knew that the situation was not good and said anxiously. Qin Huayong glared at her fiercely, which scared Madame D so much that she swallowed her unfinished words. Gather all the servants in the yard who were watching the scene just now. From now on, don't let them serve here. Qin Huayong went past Madame D and directly ordered his servant. The servant hurriedly obeyed and nodded. Madame D panicked and felt very indignant. Qin Huayong had never not given her face before. Now that he had interfered in the backyard, it was equivalent to slapping her own face. You come with me. Qin Huayong ordered his servant and then said to Madame D. After that, he strode out without looking at Madame D. Madame D looked at Nanny Zhou in panic. She knew that the situation was not good. Nanny Zhou silently tilted her head at her, indicating that she should follow Qin Huayong. At this time, it was not possible to hide even if she wanted to. Madame D gritted her teeth and helplessly followed. At least she still had someone to rely on. Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city was her reliance. The general could not really do anything to her. Nanny Zhou did not immediately follow. She looked at Qin Wanru suspiciously. She always felt that second miss seemed to be a different person these days. What on earth was going on? Feeling Nanny Zhou's gaze, Qin Wanru raised her head and looked at Nanny Zhou in silence and generosity. Her bright watery eyes were so clear that they could almost see through one's heart. Nanny Zhou panicked. She quickly tilted her head, hurriedly bowed to Qin Wanru, and then hurriedly chased after Madame D. Qin Wanru's gaze fell on Nanny Zhou. Nanny Zhou was also Madame D's servant. Compared to Nanny Fong, she was closer to Madame D. Madame D's biological mother, old Madame of Duke Yong, sent her as a confidant to Madame D. It could be said that she was the true confidant of Madame D and Qin Yuru. There were some things that she helped Madame D deal with behind the scenes. This person could not be left alive. However, she had just dealt with Nanny Fong. This was not the best time to deal with Nanny Zhou. If she remembered correctly, she could use a better opportunity in the future to deal more damage to Madame D. Nanny Zhou, who was walking forward, suddenly felt a chill on her back. She had an ominous premonition. In Madame D's room, all the servants were driven out. Even Nanny Zhou was locked outside the door. The atmosphere in the room was very gloomy. Qin Huayong stared coldly at Madame D, and his stare made Madame D's hair stand on end. She paused, picked up the teapot on the table, and poured a cup of tea for Qin Huayong. Just when she was about to speak, Qin Huayong slammed the letter on the table and asked with a gloomy face, "What is this?" I don't know. Madame D panicked. She was as flustered as she was before this letter. You don't know, but that servant girl does. Madame D, you won't always treat me as a fool, will you? Qin Huayong's voice was not loud, but the coldness in his words made Madame D's face turn pale. You will treat her as your own daughter. You will treat her as if you have two daughters. Madame D, oh Madame D, you are really a kind and benevolent mother. The anger in Qin Huayong's heart rose layer by layer. Anyone who saw it would know that he was in a rage. He wholeheartedly wanted to repay Madame D's kindness, but he raised Madame D's daughter to be worse than a servant girl. She was even bullied by the servant girl. Not only the principal servant girl, but also the servants and old maids in the courtyard who were watching and gossiping were all bad. Qin Huayong felt that he would be too ashamed to meet his old friends after he died. General, I have sincerely wanted to treat her as my own daughter, but she is not. Moreover, my mother will protect her from time to time. A loving mother will spoil a child. I don't want Wanru to be so spoiled, so I want her to manage the affairs in the courtyard by herself. But who knew that she would manage it like this? Even a servant girl is out of control. Madame D felt wronged. She held her handkerchief and cried. So it was because Qin Wanru was not anxious. Mud could not help a wall. Are you helping her? Qin Huayong suppressed his anger and said. He had always been obedient to Madame D's words. Madame D was the daughter of Duke Yong's mansion in the capital city. Speaking of which, marrying him at the beginning was considered a low marriage. If it were not for the engagement between the two families, Madame D would not have married Qin Huayong. For this reason, Qin Huayong was very grateful to her. Even though she had not given birth to a child, she did not feel too much pressure. There was nothing she could do if she was not destined to have children. Even if she only had 2 daughters, he would be very happy and did not blame Madame D for this. But he could not bear that Madame D still had the face to say such words. What about Yuru? You don't even care about Yuru's courtyard? Did you let Yuru manage it herself? And you will find a few servants who are not happy with Yuru to manage it for her. Qin Huayong said angrily, one sentence after another. If it were not for the fact that he did not want others to watch the drama, he would not have been able to bear it in Qin Wanru's courtyard. The more he believed before, the more he doubted now. General, Madame D exclaimed and wanted to explain. Don't tell me that this letter was written by Wanru? This is Jiangzhou. If she wants to send a letter to the capital city, there must be someone to deliver it or someone from the courier station to deliver it. Wanru is still a child. Do you think a child can be so thoughtful and write such a letter to be delivered to the capital city? And why don't I know that Di Yan and Wanru have been writing to each other? Di Yan is your nephew and the son-in-law you fancy. In the past, he only wrote to Yuru. Di Yan came the year before last, but when he was in the mansion, Wanru did not have any good things except for almost losing her life. What did you tell me at that time? You said that he was also a child and wanted to play with Wanru. But boys are always careless. Now you are saying that Di Yan liked Wanru at that time and Wanru thanked him for not dying in his hands. So they have been writing to each other. Who did he thank for not killing her? Qin Huayong said sarcastically. Many things just came to his mind. Thinking of it, he only felt a strong sense of ridicule and self-blame. Why couldn't he see that Madame D did not treat Wanru as her own daughter? Why didn't he see this earlier and let Wanru be in the hands of Madame D? You can't even tolerate a child whose parents died. Do you still have the face to be a mother? Qin Huayong was very disappointed and his hands were slightly trembling. He regretted his decision at that time. This child was almost ruined in his hands. Looking at Madame D in front of him, he had already made up his mind. Because of this, the problem that had been troubling him for a long time was solved. You will send away all the servants in Wanru's yard who were watching the fun, and then ask old Maidya to bring some people in to choose for Wanru. Let Wanru choose by herself. You don't have to give any advice. Cousin will help Wanru. Qin Huayong said decisively. What does it have to do with cousin? Doesn't she like to stay in the family temple all the time because she likes to be alone? Madame D's face changed. She had a bad feeling. It was not because of Qin Wanru, but because of the sudden mention of Shui Rulan. She was most wary of Shui Rulan now. Qin Huayong's eyes fell on Madame D's face. His Majesty made Madame D's eyes wander involuntarily. Her heart was beating wildly and the handkerchief in her hand was twisted into a ball. Chapter 49. Qin Huayong left after saying these words. Madame D was stunned. She stood rooted to the ground with her face as pale as snow. She watched Qin Huayong leave without saying a word. Nanny Zhou entered the door and saw Madame D standing there with a pale face. She hurried forward and called in a low voice, Madam. Nanny Zhou's words woke Madame D up. She reached out to hold Nanny Zhou and burst into tears. How could he do this? How could he do this? He wants to marry that bitch. Why? She's just a widow. Can she be his concubine? I don't agree. She cried and cursed at the same time. Her face was ferocious as if she was possessed by a ghost. The blue veins on her neck stood out. Her hand with sharp nails pinched Nanny Zhou's flesh. The pain made Nanny Zhou's face turn pale. She hurriedly pushed Madame D's hand away and said, Madam, wake up. Please wake up. What should I do? What should I do? I won't let that bitch marry me. I want her life. Madame D cried uncontrollably. She never thought that one day the honest Qin Huayong would say such words. He would suddenly oppose her proposal and marry Shui Rulan regardless of her opinion. How dare he? She was the daughter of Duke Yong's mansion. She had married him at a lower price. Madam, don't worry. It's not done yet. Don't panic. There may be a way. Seeing Madame D's expression, Nanny Zhou hurriedly reached out to hold her shoulders and shook her gently. Nanny Zhou's words successfully made Madame D's eyes light up. She reached out to hold Nanny Zhou's hand and seemed to come to herself. Nanny Zhou, what should I do? I don't want that bitch to marry me. Concubine? Why? Even if she's just a concubine, she doesn't deserve it. She's a dissolute widow. It's good enough that she doesn't drown herself in a pig cage. Madame D gritted her teeth and said with hatred. She was so shocked that she couldn't say a word to Qin Huayong. The general wants to marry Miss Shui as his concubine? Nanny Zhou's face was also very pale. She didn't dare to eavesdrop in the room just now. Yes, he said so. How dare Qin Huayong say something like that? I'm the daughter of Duke Yong's mansion. It's his ancestors' good fortune to marry me. How dare he treat me like that? Doesn't he want to go back to the capital city? Speaking of this, Madame D couldn't control herself. Her eyes were full of hatred and she gnashed her teeth. Madam, is it because no one is in charge of second Mrs. Yard just now? Nanny Zhou thought for a while and reminded Madame D. At this time, it was not good to just have a mess. Madam, the general thought. Madam, he thought that he didn't do anything. Now I'll combine it with the matter of that bitch. I'm so regretful. I shouldn't have led the drunk Qin Huayong to Shui Rulan's room and let her take advantage of it. Madame D couldn't wait to tear Shui Rulan apart right now. Madam, it's all in the past. We need to think about what to do next. Nanny Zhou's persuasion sounded a little guilty. Nanny Zhou also agreed to plot against Qin Huayong and lead Qin Huayong to Shui Rulan's room. However, they never thought that Qin Huayong wanted to marry Shui Rulan legally, and Shui Rulan seemed to agree. Nanny Zhou had thought that Shui Rulan would be so ashamed that she didn't become a nun. Moreover, Qin Huayong would feel guilty to Madame D. Even if he married into the Qin's mansion, he would only be a concubine. What should we do next? Madame D was also at a loss. Madam, don't worry. The general won't do it immediately. Nanny Zhou suddenly thought of something. Her eyes lit up and she comforted Madame D. Why? Madame D asked. Madam, think about it. So many things have happened in our residence recently. Originally, the reputation of the entire residence has been tarnished. If at this time, the general reveals that he wants to marry a second wife and that the wife is a widow, how would others view the general? They will say that the general is lustful and lustful. He still wants to marry a wife after such a thing happened to First Mississippi. If this is reported, it will affect the general's career. Nanny Zhou used to work for Duke Yong's mansion. She knew some things about the officialdom. Officials also cared about their reputation. The general's mansion was troubled now. It was not suitable for the general to marry a wife at this time. But, he will still make up his mind to marry her after some time. Madame D frowned and said with a livid face. She didn't think much of Qin Huayong before she got married. But now that she got married, she didn't think about it anymore. She focused on the Qin's mansion. Besides fighting for power, she couldn't bear the thought that Qin Huaiyong was going to marry someone else. She was the delicate miss from the capital city. How could Shui Rulan be equal to her? After some time, we also have time to plan. Madam, don't worry. Don't contradict the general at this time. We can't rush it. At least we have to wait until First Miss calms down. In such a long time, it's not difficult for us to deal with Cousin Mississippi. Nanny Zhou lowered her voice and said insidiously. Her words made Madame D calm down. She nodded with a vicious face and said, Okay, let that bitch be proud for a few days. Yes, madam, you are right. After such a thing happened, it's not good to contradict the general. Nanny Zhou said meaningfully. Qin Huaiyong had already got hold of Madame D's weakness, not only Shui Rulan, but also Qin Wanru. Although there was no solid evidence, everything pointed to Qin Huaiyong. It was not appropriate to confront Qin Huaiyong at this time. So what if I contradict him? He can still divorce me. Madame D gritted her teeth and was not convinced. I am the daughter of an aristocratic family in Duke Yong's mansion. If not. Humph, how could I marry such a useless man? Madam, if it was in the past, he wouldn't. But now that the general is angry, I'm afraid he will. If this matter is spread outside, madam, you are not in the right. Nanny Zhou reminded her. She also hinted in a low voice, Madam, you can't mention the past again. You can't take responsibility for it. Let it rot. Nanny Zhou reminded her. I won't say it. Madame D nodded and turned back to sit on the chair. She picked up the cup of water she had just poured and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it down. Nanny Zhou, help Qin Wanru to clean up the people in the courtyard later. No matter who she says is unsuitable, take them away, lest she uses this matter to annoy the general again. Although Madame D was not angry with Qin Huaiyong for treating her like this, she also knew that she had to bow down at this time. On one side was Shui Rulan, and on the other side was Qin Wanru. Comparing the two, it was better to deal with Shui Rulan first. After all, Qin Wanru was just a child. She believed that without Shui Rulan's trouble, she could deal with Qin Wanru. Madam, this old servant understands. This old servant will do it in a moment. I will also let old Maidya bring people in for second miss to choose. Madam, during this period, you'd better treat second miss well and let the general calm down. Seeing that she didn't lose her reason, Nanny Zhou breathed a sigh of relief, nodded and reminded her. I will. Madame D gritted her teeth, and the handkerchief in her hand was crumpled by her. She said, I'll pay more attention to that girl now, and I won't be less careful than Yuru. But I won't let go of that bitch. Madam, you mean? Nanny Zhou asked carefully. Isn't the old woman in poor health recently? In the past, she liked to go to Jingxin Monastery to see the master of Jingxin Monastery to recuperate. These days she will go there too. Madame D said with a gloomy face. She wanted to deal with Shui Rulan in Jingxin Monastery. Madam, do you want to deal with Cousin Miss at that time? Nanny Zhou immediately understood and pointed to the direction of Jingxin Monastery. In the past, when old grandma was sick, she would go there, and this time was no exception. I can't deal with her in the mansion. What happens outside the mansion can't be blamed on me, right? If Shui Rulan is willing to lower herself, she can't blame anyone else. Madame D sneered sinisterly. Second miss won't send people over. Nanny Zhou thought for a while and asked. Why not? It's just that we're not going to deal with that girl now, but not forever. She wants to choose maids, right? I'll let her choose carefully. Madame D raised the corner of her eyes. At this time, her eyes looked like triangles, revealing a sense of viciousness. Let Yuru choose a few maids tomorrow. She happened to have a maid in her hands who wanted to be sent to Qin Wanru. Letting Qin Yuru go was to stir up trouble and add fuel to the fire. Yes, I'll make the arrangements now. All the servant girls and old maids in Qin Wanru's courtyard were driven away, and Qing Chui, who was the principal servant girl, was sold to another mansion. For a servant girl who was not loyal to her master, even if someone from another mansion bought her, she would no longer be a capable servant girl. She would only be the lowest level servant girl. Jiangzhou was only so big. Some things could be known by everyone with a little bit of information. One could imagine what would happen to Qing Chui. When old Maid brought the maids over, Shui Rulan also came out from the family temple. She first went to see old grandma, then came to Qin Wanru's courtyard to help her choose maids. Because she heard that second miss of the general's mansion needed a lot of manpower, old Maid brought a lot of maids and old maids. With so many people squeezing into Qin Wanru's courtyard, it looked full. Qin Wanru and Shui Rulan sat on the chairs in the corridor. Qing Yu and Nanny Yu stood by her side, and Qianghua stood behind Shui Rulan. Second miss, look, these maids are all smart. Do you want to choose a few more? The madam of the general's mansion said that second miss must be satisfied with these maids. Old Maidya was a good talker. She knew that Qin Wanru was the one choosing maids today, so she kept praising her. She then pulled one of her maids in front of Qin Wanru and said, "Second miss, look, this maid is only 13 years old, but she is very good at taking care of others. She has a few younger brothers and sisters at home, and she has been taking care of them all the time. If it wasn't for the fact that there are so many children at home, her family wouldn't have sold her." This was a very thin maid. Her eyes were a little lively, but she didn't look annoying. She didn't look outstanding, and was completely different from Qing Chui in the past. She had the kind of appearance that would make a good impression on the master at first glance. Although she was young, she looked mature. She was startled by old Maidya's pull, but she still bowed respectfully to Qin Wanru, and then stood by the side with her head down. She had quick reflexes and was mature. This was actually the most suitable maid for a young miss from an aristocratic family like Qin Wanru. She was usually chosen to be the personal maid of the young miss. On one hand, she could take care of the young miss, and on the other hand, she could guide the young miss's behavior. Chapter 50. The girl came over and bowed to Shui Rulan. Then, she lowered her head obediently and did not say a word. She behaved like a servant girl of a noble family, which made people nod their heads repeatedly. "What's your name?" Shui Rulan looked at her and asked softly. "Lu Shui." "How old are you?" 13. "Do you miss home?" "Yes." Her question and answer were very natural, even with the grievance of a girl who was not sensible. How many children would not feel wronged after being sold by their own families? Qin Wanru's eyes slowly fell on her hand, which had been hidden in her sleeves. This should be the uniform issued by the old maid broker. All the servant girls in the courtyard wore such clothes, including Lu Shui. However, the clothes were a little short. When she moved just now, a part of her wrist was exposed, and there were some old and new scars. But in a flash, the sleeves were covered again, and no one could see it. Then, Shui Rulan was very satisfied with Lu Shui. She thought it was good for this girl to be a personal servant girl of Qin Wanru. When she was about to say something, she suddenly heard voices coming from the door of the courtyard. She looked up and saw Qin Yuru coming with a few servant girls and old maids. Her face involuntarily darkened. Qin Yuru's face was covered with a piece of veil, which covered the scars on her face and prevented dust from staining the scars. Only a pair of eyes could be seen. She held her right hand tightly and held her right hand carefully with her left hand. After coming in, she slightly bowed to Shui Rulan and said, "Aunt Shui, I'm not in good health, so I can't bow fully. Please forgive me." Shui Rulan's eyes fell on Qin Yuru's injured right hand. She looked at it and asked gently, "Yuru, you don't have to be so polite. Is your injury okay?" "Not very good," Qin Yuru lowered her head and said bitterly. "It's okay. Ask the servants to pay more attention. It may not leave a scar. Shui Rulan comforted her in a low voice. Thank you, Aunt Shui. Qin Yuru said politely. She turned to look at Qin Wanru and said, Sister Wanru is choosing servants here. Sister, can you also choose a few servant girls? In the past, there was nothing much to do, so I didn't feel that there was a shortage of manpower. Recently, my hand has been injured, so I realized that there are fewer people in the courtyard. I can't use them. Big sister, you can choose it yourself. Qin Wanru smiled and said calmly. Qin Yuru's attitude today was really good. Not only was she very kind to him, but she also looked as if there was no grudge between them. After so many things had happened, they could not go back to the past. Qin Yuru's attitude seemed to have other intentions, but he did not know what her intentions were. Second sister, have you chosen someone? Qin Yuru rolled her eyes and asked with a smile. I haven't chosen anyone yet. Big sister, you choose first. Qin Wanru shook her head. What about this girl? Qin Yuru looked at the crowd. After looking around for a while, his gaze suddenly fell on Lu Shui, and he looked at her with interest. Shui Rulan frowned. She didn't like Qin Yuru's overbearing behavior, but she had no right to criticize her given her current status. This girl didn't choose either. Why does big sister like her? Qin Wanru looked at Lu Shui with a faint smile, and then turned to Qin Yuru with a pair of big smiling eyes. If big sister really likes this girl, it's not impossible to negotiate. Second sister, didn't you say that you haven't chosen? Why is there a need to negotiate? Qin Yuru said with slight dissatisfaction. In the past, if there was a need to choose a maid, Qin Yuru would usually choose first. Only after she had chosen the rest could Qin Wanru choose. This was almost a rule in the mansion, and even old Maidya knew about it. Hearing her words, old Maidya hurriedly smiled and said, if First Miss likes her, First Miss can take her away. There is no need to negotiate. Second Miss Swa and Second Miss have not officially chosen. The backyard of the general's mansion was managed by Madame D. Now that everyone knew that First Miss was Madame D's biological daughter, of course old Maidya had to curry favor with her. I like her, but I haven't officially chosen her. This girl can still be taken away by big sister. Is that what you mean? Qin Wanru looked at old Maidya and asked with a faint smile. Old Maidya's heart skipped a beat when she heard this question. She immediately thought of the recent events in Jiangzhou and quickly waved her hand. That's not what I meant. I meant that since Second Miss hasn't chosen her, First Miss Qin has. First Miss Qin can choose first. Recently, First Miss Qin's reputation was not very good. It was said that she couldn't even leave her house. On the other hand, Second Miss Qin's reputation was very good, and it was said that she was becoming more and more favored by the general. If she really offended Second Miss Qin, it would not be worth it. What do you think, big sister? Qin Wanru asked. My idea is to follow second sister's idea. Since second sister has already chosen her, it's meaningless for me to choose again. I'll choose 2 other maids. Second sister, do you have any objections? Qin Yuru said in a friendly manner. She actually gave up on Lu Shui and looked at the crowd. Shui Rulan's expression softened. She looked at Qin Yuru with some hesitation. Madame D was so vicious. Was Qin Yuru really not that bad? After all, she was still young. Even if she had been misled by Madame D, she was not hopeless. Big sister, you're too polite. You can choose whoever you like. Qin Wanru said generously. Qin Yuru's eyes flashed with joy. She seemed to be very happy. She walked into the crowd and looked around. After a while, she chose 4 maids. These 4 maids all looked extremely intelligent. It could be said that they were the smartest of all the maids that old Maidya had brought with her. They had been standing at the very front of the crowd all this while. They were all delicate and pretty, and they looked very charming. Their eyes were sharp, but their expressions were also very sensible. After these maids were chosen, the rest of them seemed to be of a higher level. The rest of the maids seemed to be of a higher level. Second sister, can I choose these maids? Qin Yuru looked like she wanted Qin Wanru to make the decision. It seemed that if Qin Wanru said no, she would give up the maids. Big sister, as long as you like them. Qin Wanru said indifferently. Nanny Yu, go and help me choose a few maids. Nanny Yu nodded and walked over. She looked very carefully. Previously, the people in the courtyard did not take Miss seriously. Of course, it was Madam who instigated it, but it was also the reason why they did not choose good people. Nanny Fong was the one who chose the maids. This time, Qin Wanru could not choose some traitors. This time, Nanny Yu chose all the maids who looked well-behaved. Although they were not as smart as the others, they all seemed to respect their master. Nanny Yu chose 10 maids at one go. There were a lot fewer people in the courtyard, so they had to choose a few more to make up for the shortage. Second sister, can you give this maid to me? I think she is quite good. Qin Yuru suddenly pointed at one of the maids chosen by Nanny Yu and said, I will exchange this maid by my side for yours, is that okay? She pointed at a maid by her side. This was the most beautiful one among the 4 maids chosen by Qin Yuru. At this time, she stood quietly beside Qin Yuru, as if she did not know that her master was about to change. Yuru. Shui Rulan couldn't stand it anymore. Today, Qin Wanru was supposed to select people from Qin Wanru's courtyard. Not only did Qin Yuru interfere, but she also picked people first and picked all the good ones. Now she even wanted to come to Qin Wanru's courtyard to exchange people. It was really too much. Yes, Aunt Shui, I am wrong. Qin Yuru immediately came to her senses and hurriedly bowed her head. Then she looked at Qin Yuru with a humble face and said, Second sister, it is big sister's fault. When I saw this maid, I suddenly felt that she looked like a person, so I was distracted for a moment. I made a fool of myself in front of you. Qin Wanru's eyes followed Qin Yuru's gaze and also fell on this maid. She looked very ordinary, about 13 or 14 years old. At this time, she was standing beside Nanny Yu in a well-behaved manner. She slightly lowered her head, but her beautiful outline could still be seen. She looked familiar, indeed very familiar. Something suddenly flashed in Qin Wanru's mind. She pressed her hand on the horizontal bar of the chair. If it was not for her strong self-control, Qin Wanru would have jumped up at this time. She knew this maid. In her previous life, this maid was Qin Yuru's maid, and she was one of the few maids who was kind to Qin Wanru. She used to secretly pass some news to her in order to avoid Qin Yuru's limelight. But these were all things in her previous life. Very good, Qin Yuru's people were sent to him so openly. A trace of coldness flashed in her eyes. She wanted this person. Big sister, who do you remember? Why didn't I recognize her? Qin Yuru smiled slightly and relaxed her hand. He sat down and looked at the girl carefully as he said. An old friend. Second sister, you may not know her. Qin Yuru smiled and said, but there was a hint of darkness in her expression. Today, she was here to stir up trouble. Her target was not the maid in front of her, but when she saw the maid in front of her, her heart suddenly beat wildly. This face was a little familiar to her, and what she said was true. But at the moment, she could not remember where she had seen this face. Thinking that she was a little worried, she wanted to keep this maid by her side. Of course, the so-called old friend was just an excuse. Big sister, since you have chosen someone, go back and have a good rest. Qin Wanru smiled calmly and refused with a cold look in her eyes. Her words were polite, but the meaning behind her words was already very impolite. However, what Qin Yuru did today was also not right. It was obviously Qin Wanru who wanted to choose people, but she picked a few good ones first. At this time, she also knew when to stop. Anyway, she could not remember who this girl was at the moment. It should not be important. She would go back and tell her mother before talking about other things. Anyway, her target today was not her. She laughed and said, "Aunt Shui, then I will go back first. If you are free, come over and talk to me." Shui Rulan nodded. Qin Yuru smiled at Qin Wanru and walked out with the 4 newly selected maids. After a few steps, she suddenly looked back at Lu Shui and said in a low voice, as if she just found out, "This girl looks really good." It seemed that Qin Yuru liked Lu Shui very much. However, now that Qin Wanru had taken a fancy to Lu Shui, she could not openly take her, so she could only turn around and leave. After turning around, Qin Yuru's face showed a little bit of pride. Her mother meant to send this girl to Qin Wanru and let her pick all the good ones, then show that she also valued this one. However, because Qin Wanru took a fancy to her first, she was embarrassed to pick. With these conditions, Qin Wanru would definitely take this girl into her courtyard. Chapter 51. Wanru, have you chosen someone? Shui Rulan stopped looking at Qin Yuru's back, looked at Qin Wanru and asked with concern. "Aunt Shui, just a few. I believe in Nanny Yu's judgment." Qin Wanru nodded and said, "Come in." Shui Rulan stood up and walked into the room. Qin Wanru knew that Shui Rulan had something to say to her but didn't want others to know, so she followed her in. "Wanru, your elder sister is strange today." After Qin Wanru followed her into the room, Shui Rulan hesitated and frowned to remind her. "Aunt Shui, don't worry. I will be careful of her." Qin Wanru smiled slightly. In fact, she had already guessed it. Do you want to give up all the maids this time and ask old Maidya to bring a few more maids for you to choose from tomorrow?" Shui Rulan's eyes flickered and said. Although she knew that Qin Wanru was now vigilant against Qin Yuru and her daughter, she was still worried. Yuru's arrival today is very coincidental, and she seems to have another purpose. Shui Rulan reminded her again. Although Qin Wanru was a smart girl, no matter how smart she was still a child in the eyes of Shui Rulan who had watched her grow up. Compared with the insidious and cunning Madame D, Qin Wanru couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. "Aunt Shui, I will be careful. Besides, I still have you. I am not afraid." Qin Wanru raised her black eyes. Her words were very meaningful, but her eyes were full of trust and dependence. She was familiar with Shui Rulan's character. Sometimes she was a little indecisive. This time, she deliberately used the matter of Qin Yuru to dispel all Shui Rulan's concerns. Shui Rulan's hands trembled slightly. She seemed to think of something and was a little confused. She slowly lowered her head and said, "Wanru, I actually haven't. Aunt Shui, Grandma is old, and I am too young." Qin Wanru rolled her watery eyes and said, "Did you hear any gossip?" Shui Rulan did hesitate, but Qin Wanru did not agree with this kind of hesitation. In fact, at this point, it was not a matter of whether Shui Rulan hesitated or not. If she retreated now, it would only make Madame D crazily speed up the pace and put herself in danger step by step. In the previous life, Shui Rulan should have lost her baby because of this reason. "But, there's really nothing going on between your father and me." Shui Rulan was a little depressed. "So what? Who would believe it?" Qin Wanru asked decisively, which made Shui Rulan speechless and looked at Qin Wanru for a long time. "Miss, I think what second miss said is right. Now you are fighting against Madam. If you retreat at this time, Madam will not let you go. Moreover, you have rejected the general's help." Qianghua pushed her and said in a low voice. "But..." Shui Rulan was still hesitating. "Aunt Shui, you should go back and think about it. It's not just about you." Grandma and I also need you. Qin Wanru looked a little sad, but she still restrained her emotions and looked very wronged. Wanru. Looking at Qin Wanru like this, Shui Rulan's hesitation suddenly disappeared at this moment. Don't worry, I know what to do next. What on earth did this child experience? At such a young age, she seemed to have seen through the world and even helped her to plan. She was only a child who had just turned 11 years old. Her immature body still had the appearance of a weak child. Even though there was still a faint ring of baby fat on her face, her body was very thin. Not only was she thin, but she was also small, even thinner than other children of her age. Shui Rulan looked sad, closed her eyes, and then opened them again. There was a faint smile on her face, and her eyes became firm. Wanru, don't worry. I will definitely take care of you and Aunt. Since I can take care of it openly, I will not hesitate this time. If there was a little hesitation before, at this time, when seeing Qin Wanru who was sad but depended on her, Shui Rulan had eliminated all doubts. Miss, you have finally thought it through. Qianghua said with surprise. Shui Rulan nodded and carefully told Qin Wanru a few more words. Then she left with Qianghua. But when she left, she looked at the selected maids again. Even if Madame D and her daughter wanted to plot against Qin Wanru, they had to pass through her first. A child might make mistakes, but it would be much better if she was there. Madame D, she would not see her dominate the backyard of General's mansion, and she would not see Qin Wanru being bullied by Madame D and her daughter. Behind her, Qin Wanru slightly opened her cherry lips, and her smile was like a fresh flower. You will stay here and be called Qing Shui. Qin Wanru's eyes fell on Lu Shui in the front. She was the maid that Qin Yuru deliberately asked her to recognize. A maid who was sent to her. Yes, second miss. Qing Shui answered in a low voice. Her behavior was respectful and decent, and she did not become uneasy because of what Qin Yuru had done. Then Qin Wanru gave names to the other maids, and then her eyes fell on the first maid after looking around. Qin Wanru gave this maid the name Chu Lu, which was the same as her name in her previous life. The difference was that in her previous life, she was Qin Yuru's maid, but in this life, she was Qin Wanru's maid. Were you also sold by your family? Qin Wanru picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, put it down and asked casually. Yes, miss, Chu Lu said with her head lowered. Tell me about your family. Qin Wanru said casually. I have 2 elder sisters and 2 younger sisters in my family, Chu Lu answered more carefully. When Chu Lu heard the question, she answered more carefully. She was the middle child in the family. Her mother had 5 daughters, and her father was very angry. He didn't have a good attitude towards these losers. Her 2 sisters were also sold, and it was said that her 2 younger sisters were going to be sold as well. Do you still want to go back to see them? Qin Wanru asked meaningfully. I don't want to go back. My parents don't like me. My 2 elder sisters have been sold and have not come back since. My 2 younger sisters may be sold soon. They want to have a son. Chu Lu said unwillingly, gritting her teeth. It was because she and her sisters were born girls that their parents did not like them, and so they were sold one by one. Since this is the case, live well in the mansion from now on. Remember to be loyal to our second miss, Qin Yu said coldly. Her eyes also fell on Chu Lu with Qin Wanru. She also saw Qin Yuru's behavior just now, and was afraid that Chu Lu and Qing Shui would harm Qin Wanru. I know, I will be loyal to second miss. Chu Lu nodded, and her expression became more and more respectful. If there is a little bit of disloyalty to second miss, the consequence is not just a matter of a beating. The nanny in charge of this courtyard was Nanny Fang, and she was Madame's servant. She was specially sent to serve second miss, but who knew that she was disloyal and was beaten to death a few days ago? Qin Yu said coldly, her little face taut. Qin Wanru curled her lips and leaned back, very satisfied. Qing Yu's momentum was becoming more and more like her personal servant. Her words were also very powerful, and she knew how to say it to be more shocking. As expected, the maids all shivered in fear. Wealthy families had strict rules. Old Maidya had already warned them time and time again when these maids were sent into the family. However, no matter how much she knew, she didn't expect this to happen just a few days ago. And it was related to the master in front of them. Although the second miss in front of them looked cute, at this moment, no one dared to look down on her. Even Qing Shui, who looked very calm, could not help but secretly peek at Qin Wanru, and her face was slightly pale from nervousness. Since we have come to this point, don't blame me for being harsh. I will not explain what will happen to those who do not know the master's people. Now, all of you can leave. Nanny Yu will assign you tasks and where you will live, Qin Yu said loudly. Yes. The servant girls bowed to Qin Wanru respectfully, and then left. Miss Yu. Seeing that the servant girls had left, Qin Yu said uneasily. Just now, she had actually forcefully raised her momentum, and looked confident and in control of everything. But after all, she was only a 13-year-old girl, and when the servant girls left, she still felt a little worried. First miss, are you really here today to pick a few servant girls? I don't think so. Qin Wanru said lightly. Then what should we do? Qin Yu understood what Qin Wanru meant, and her face changed dramatically. Qing Chui had just left, and if there were a few more people like Qing Chui, there would be trouble. Nothing. Wait slowly, Qing Shui will take the position of the principal servant girl. But don't let her serve alone in the room, Qin Wanru ordered in a low voice. She had to observe Qing Shui first. Yes, I know. Qing Yu said cautiously. Ask Nanny Yu to investigate Qing Shui and Chu Lu. Qin Wanru thought for a moment, and then ordered. These two girls were the most suspicious today, so she would investigate them. Ask that old Maidya more, and find out more. Qin Wanru asked old Maidya to come to the mansion tomorrow to settle the bill. At that time, she could ask Nanny Yu to get some information, and if necessary, she could ask Wang Feng to go outside the mansion to inquire. From the tone of the two servant girls just now, they were both from Jiangzhou Prefecture, and should have the accent of the prefecture city. I understand, no wonder Miss didn't ask old Maidya to settle the bill just now. Qing Yu said with admiration. While they were talking, Nanny Yu had already made arrangements for the servant girls, and now, she lifted the curtain and walked in. Nanny Yu, Miss just asked you to ask more about Qing Shui and Chu Li's family when you go to settle the bill with old Maidya tomorrow. It's best if you ask Brother Fengzi to find out if it's true. Qing Yu said hurriedly when she saw Nanny Yu come in. Rest assured, Miss, I will find out everything tomorrow. Nanny Yu nodded in agreement. Nanny Yu, you don't have to go early tomorrow. You can go after old Maidya is almost done waiting, Qin Wanru suddenly added with a hidden meaning. How did she choose? Who did she choose? If Madame D and Qin Yuru really had an ulterior motive, they would definitely inquire about it tomorrow. She gave them time to find out. If Madame D really sent someone, it would mean that there was something wrong. Chapter 52. Old Maidya came to the general's mansion the next day. The general's mansion was a big customer. However, old Maidya waited for a long time in the accountant's room before she received the money. She then left with a smile. Although she waited for a long time, she chatted with people outside the accountant's room, so she didn't think it was a long time. There were many people gossiping outside the accountant's room, wave after wave. Old Maidya wasn't an idiot. There were some things that she could say and some things that she shouldn't. She knew very well that after taking the money, she wouldn't offend anyone. Being a businesswoman would make money out of harmony. Even if she was biased, it would only be a little. She couldn't afford to offend anyone. Therefore, there were some words that she said with a trembling voice. Those things had nothing to do with her, so she didn't want to get involved. Qin Wanru went to Madame Dowager's courtyard early in the morning, and Shui Rulan was already there. After serving Madame Dowager with some porridge, they let Madame Dowager lean on the bed to rest. Old grandma couldn't sleep well because of her cough. After eating some porridge, she seemed to feel better. She closed her eyes and leaned on the bed, as if she had fallen asleep. Shui Rulan made a gesture to Qin Wanru and followed her out of the inner room. The servant girl had already served tea. When they sat down, Shui Rulan reached out and pressed her forehead. It was obvious that she wasn't in good spirits. Did Aunt Shui sleep at Grandma's place last night? Qin Wanru asked. Aunt didn't sleep well last night. She was usually fine at this time of the year. Why did she come so early this time? Shui Rulan nodded, frowning. In the past, Grandma would have this illness at this time of the year, but she wouldn't cough so badly all of a sudden. Moreover, this illness didn't happen in the morning. Qin Wanru pursed her red lips and said. She remembered clearly what happened that day. Qi Rongji suddenly had an accident and Grandma had been coughing since she came back. It didn't seem like she had accidentally caught a cold at night and was sick in the morning. His words reminded Shui Rulan. She frowned and hesitated for a moment before asking, is it because of being stimulated by something? Is it an allergy? Old Grandma's cough was indeed an old problem. She would easily get sick when it was cold in the past. But in addition, she also had a cough problem that might be caused by allergies, which Shui Rulan knew. Looking at Shui Rulan's face, Qin Wanru knew that Shui Rulan also had some doubts at this time. She was the only one who suspected this matter, but she was young and weak. Even if she had doubts, she could not find out anything. However, Shui Rulan was different. That's possible, but that day, grandmother only came into contact with him. When it came to mother, big sister, young lady Qi, and me, he kept coughing after we came back. Qin Wanru said carefully. Let's go to Jingshin Monastery and ask the master of Jingshin Monastery to help me take a look. Shui Rulan could not come to a conclusion at the moment, so she made up her mind after thinking for a while. Last night, she slept in old grandma's room and heard that old grandma kept coughing anxiously. She coughed so badly at night, how could she still be energetic during the day? Moreover, the cough this time was so fierce that old grandma's voice became hoarse after only a few days. At this time, it was difficult for her to speak, and her voice was very low. Then let's talk to father first. Qin Wanru nodded, knowing that this was the only way. In the past, when grandmother got sick, she would also go to Jingshin Monastery to stay for a while and let the master of Jingshin Monastery to help her recuperate, and the effect was always good. After the discussion, Qin Wanru went back to her yard, leaving Shui Rulan sitting outside alone, still frowning. She also felt that this matter was very strange. Old grandma's illness this time came a little too suddenly. Nanny Duan came out from the inner room and said to her, Miss Shui, old grandma asked you to come in. Aunt woke up. Shui Rulan frowned slightly, stood up, and followed behind Nanny Duan. I feel fine now, Miss Shui, please come in with me first. Nanny Duan nodded, and the two entered the inner room. Old grandma on the bed opened her eyes, and her eyes fell on Shui Rulan with pity. Shui Rulan understood the pity, and for a moment, she was so sad that she almost shed tears, but thinking of old grandma's health, she suppressed the sadness in her heart, and forced a smile. Old grandma waved to her, and then pointed to the small stool beside the bed. Shui Rulan hurried 2 steps forward, took her hand, and sat on the small stool. Nanny Duan knew that old grandma had something to say to Shui Rulan, so she left silently. Rulan, you're wronged. Old grandma's voice was very hoarse, dark, and almost inaudible. Shui Rulan tried her best to listen and shook her head. Aunt, I don't feel wronged. I originally wanted to serve you until you grew old. It's you who raised me. I don't feel wronged at all by your side. She knew that old grandma was talking about the problem of her marriage, and she was afraid that old grandma would be more worried, so she only said that she was willing. Since it's related to Madam D, and your cousin also said that he won't let you be wronged, then you should officially marry into General's mansion. After a few days, you can go out to live for a few days, and when all the ceremony is done, you will be carried into the door. Old grandma said a lot of words in one breath, and couldn't recover for a while, so she coughed again. Shui Rulan's eyes turned red, and she reached out to gently pat old grandma's back, and, don't worry, you should suppress your illness first. I'll accompany you to Jingxin Monastery, and when you get better, we'll leave. If they wanted to officially marry, it would naturally be carried into General's mansion by 8 sedan bearers, and it was naturally not suitable to live in General's mansion. That's fine. Old grandma stopped coughing, and reached out to pat Shui Rulan's hand, and said, when you enter the mansion, I'll hand Zhuozhuo to you. She's just a child, and I'm old and weak, I'm afraid that I can't protect her all the time. At that time, you'll have to take care of Zhuozhuo. Old grandma almost ruined her little granddaughter's marriage, because she was old, and her eyes and ears were not sharp, so her little granddaughter was almost doomed. Every time she thought of this, old grandma felt distressed. In the past, she only knew that Madame D's heart was biased, but now she found that Madame D was not only biased, but also extremely vicious. Aunt, don't worry, I'll take care of Wanru, and I won't let her be wronged again. Shui Rulan promised, and she also felt distressed for Qin Wanfa. When she was in the family temple, she didn't allow Qianghua to inquire about anything, so she didn't know much about Qin Wanru and Qin Yuru. After leaving the family temple, she knew the cause of the matter, and became more determined to make decisions for Qin Wanru. You don't need to worry about Zhuozhuo's matter. As for your own matter, I'll help you. General's mansion owes you the identity of a co-wife. Old grandma's eyes fell on Shui Rulan, and she said kindly. After saying these words, Shui Rulan lowered her head, not because of shyness, but to cover the coldness in her eyes. With that letter, she really wasn't afraid that Madame D would clamor against her. This letter, which was not taken out, was Madame D's weakness. Just now, Qin Wanru also told her in a low voice that Madame D wanted to be one step ahead and frame her by writing this letter. She deliberately made such a scene. But in the end, the play did not come to an end, and this letter could still be a weakness. Although it was not real evidence, now that Madame D had lost all credibility, this letter was a key to make Qin Huayong suspicious. Madame D didn't dare to play any tricks on this letter. When Qin Wanru returned to the courtyard, Nanny Yu was already waiting there. When she saw Qin Wanru, she hurriedly entered the room to report. Qing Shui was sent to old Media last night, and she hasn't been properly trained. But because she seems to be well behaved without being trained, she was brought here today. Qin Wanru put together Nanny Yu's words and asked slowly. Yes, miss, what do you think? Nanny Yu nodded and said in a low voice. Don't do anything, just leave her. Chun Wanru smiled coldly. Needless to say, this Qing Shui must be someone arranged by Madame D to use Qin Yuru to provoke her into accepting Qing Shui. Among these maids, Qing Shui was one of the most outstanding, but the other outstanding maids had all been taken away by Qin Yuru, so Qing Shui was the only one she could choose. For this reason, Qin Yuru had deliberately come to put on a play, regardless of her hand injury. It was really not easy. Chu Lu has been with old Media for some time and has been trained for a period of time. Today is also the first day she has been sent out for selection, Nanny Yu said. Qin Wanru thought about Nanny Yu's words and said, let them live together. Miss, will something bad happen if we let them live together? Nanny Yu said uneasily. Qing Shui is obviously not a simple maid. It's okay, they are living well. Chu Lu is a smart girl. Give her some advice and let her get closer to Qing Shui. If anything happens, let her report directly to you. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, and the corners of her mouth curled up a little coldly. Qing Shue's hand was injured, but she didn't know where it came from. What did it have to do with her entering the mansion? Chu Lu should be good at this kind of thing. Yes, I will make arrangements for them in a while, Nanny Yu said knowingly. Nanny Yu, pack a few more clothes later. Grandmother is not in good health, so she may go to Jingxin Monastery to recuperate. I will go with her, Qin Wanru ordered again. Rest assured, Mississippi. I know. Who are you going to bring to Jingxin Monastery this time? Nanny Yu stopped and asked in detail. Qin Wanru tapped her fingers on the table gently. She thought for a while and said, I'll take Qin Yu with me. Nanny Yu, you stay in the mansion and help me keep an eye on things in the garden, especially Qing Shui and Chu Lu. If they live together, maybe something interesting will happen, especially when I'm not here. Qing Shui's intentions were unclear, and Chu Lu was not easy to deal with. Qin Wanru was looking forward to what would happen. Nanny Yu didn't understand what Qin Wanru said at first, but seeing Qin Wanru's confident look, she nodded and went to make arrangements. Chapter 53. What happened? Qin Wanru asked without lifting her eyelids. It was said that when Chu Lu went out to run errands, she accidentally bumped into first Mrs. Servant Girl. The servant girl slapped Chu Lu hard. Chu Lu was not convinced and fought with her. Now she has been taken away by Madam. Nanny Yu's expression changed slightly. It was not because of the fight between the two servant girls, but because this matter was related to Madame D. Qin Yuru's servant girl. Qin Yuru was interested in this Chu Lu yesterday. In less than a day, Qin Yuru had already thought of a way. It seemed that Qin Yuru and Madame D cared a lot about this person. She was just a servant girl. If she didn't have the memory of her last life, Qin Wanru really didn't think this servant girl was important. But now Madame D also took action. It seemed that the importance of this servant girl was really more important than she thought. Miss, Madam invites you over to talk about the matter of the two servant girls. Qin Yu walked in with a gloomy expression. Everyone in Qin Wanru's courtyard felt heavy when they met people from Madame D's courtyard. The word, filial piety, was as big as the sky. Just say that I am sick and can't go at this time. Qin Wanru quietly took a sip of tea and said slowly. Will this work? Qin Yu felt uneasy. It doesn't matter. At this time, she won't say anything. Even if she had doubts, so many things had happened. At this time, Madame D did not dare to quarrel with her again. Since Qin Wanru said so confidently, Qin Yu also felt relieved. She went out and passed Qin Wanru's words to the old maid sent by Madame D. When she came in again, Qin Wanru took her to the inner room. Qin Wanru took off her outer clothes and let her hair down. She took a mirror to look at herself. Looking at her red lips, she frowned. The color of her lips was really a little brighter than before, and it reflected on her face, which was not bad. An 11-year-old girl with skin as clear as snow and such a lip color made her face more delicate and lively. She did not look sick at all. Go get some powder. Qin Yu went to the dressing table and took a box of powder. She carefully rubbed some powder on Qin Wanru's face. Although her skin looked fair, it was much darker. As for the color of her lips, Qin Wanru did not hide it. Her lips had always been much redder than ordinary people. Even if she wanted to hide it, she could not. When they were done, Nanny Yu came in and reported, "Second miss, Madam is here to see you." This speed. How fast? Qin Wanru sneered in her heart and leaned back weakly. Qin Yu hurriedly took a cushion and put it behind her, looking dispirited. This was what Mrs. Qin saw when she entered the room. The little girl leaned against the wall weakly. Although her lips were red, her face was pale. Was she really sick? Wanru, you were fine when you went to Madame Dowager's place. How did you become like this in such a short time? It must be the servants who didn't serve you well. Mrs. Chin walked in with a face full of concern. Her words seemed to be concerned about Qin Wanru, but her intention was malicious. Madame Dowager was fine before. When she heard that something had happened, she immediately said that she was sick when she summoned her. As a child, she actually pretended to be sick and asked her mother to come in person. If this reputation spread, she would be regarded as an unfilial child. Qin Wanru opened her eyes weakly. She seemed to be struggling, but still fell back without any strength. She said weakly, "Mother, my hand hurts. It seems that when I helped Grandma to take things, I touched it. It hurts so much that even my head hurts now." It was rare for someone to get sick suddenly for no reason. However, Qin Wanru's hand was still injured. It was just a matter of time before she bumped her hand again. Mrs. Qin was stunned. She did not expect Qin Wanru to react so quickly. Her words were not only not unfilial, but also very filial. "It turns out that you bumped your hand. I have already asked someone to invite a doctor over. Let the doctor have a look later." Mrs. Qin sat down in front of the bed and said with a smile. Qin Wanru sneered in her heart. Mrs. Qin wanted to expose the fact that she pretended to be sick and even prepared a doctor for her. Unfortunately, she was injured. If she said that it hurt, could the doctor say that it didn't hurt? Moreover, her injury was on her arm and the doctor couldn't directly look at it. She was really not afraid that Mrs. Qin would find a doctor. Did the wound split open? Let Nanny Zhou have a look and apply some medicine. Mrs. Qin said with a face full of concern. In her heart, she secretly cursed the girl in front of her for being so cunning. She had said that she was sick. She thought that bringing a doctor over would be enough to prove that she was not sick. Unexpectedly, it was the wound. The doctor was a man. "Mother, I have asked Nanny Yu to change the medicine." Qin Wanru shook her head. "Mother, I still have the medicine from Duke Yang's mansion. Changing it to this medicine may be more effective." Mrs. Qin stood still with a smile. She was going to tell Nanny Zhou that she had to see the girl's injury today. Mrs. Qin didn't believe that she had bumped into something again. "Mother, do you have good medicine?" Qin Wanru was slightly stunned. She raised her clear eyes and looked at Mrs. Qin blankly. Her bright eyes made Mrs. Qin panic, but she quickly calmed down and nodded. "Yes, I do. I will ask someone to bring it now." "Since you have good medicine, why didn't you give it to Wanru before?" Qin Wanru's eyes turned red, with the innocence and grievance of a little girl. I didn't bring it because I didn't have much left. I was afraid that it wouldn't be enough." Mrs. Qin felt bad and hurriedly explained with a dry smile. Her back was slightly sweating. This girl was getting more and more cunning. She was so focused on looking at Qin Wanru's injury that she forgot about this. "Then why didn't you bring it later?" Qin Wanru sniffed and asked. "She was small. I thought the medicine you used was good. Seeing that you didn't say anything, I didn't ask you." Mrs. Qin stuttered and her face changed slightly. "Thank you, Mother. I will use this medicine for the time being. My injury hurts if I change it again," Qin Wanru said with a little coquettishness. She reached out and touched her injured arm. "Then, don't change it," Mrs. Qin said, almost gritting her teeth. While they were talking, the doctor came. Mrs. Qin stepped aside and let the doctor feel Qin Wanru's pulse. Qin Wanru was injured and lost a lot of blood. Her body was indeed weak. Hearing that she had bumped into her arm again, the doctor couldn't tell anything. He just told her to change the medicine again and pay more attention to her body. She should eat more things to nourish the blood and nourish the body. Then he gave her a prescription to regulate her body and left. The doctor was also sensible. He didn't dare to say that the second miss was fine. After the doctor left, Mrs. Qin came to Qin Wanru with a smile. "Wanru, one of your servant girls had a fight with one of your elder sister's servant girls. I wanted to ask you to come here to talk about this. She couldn't prove that Qin Wanru was pretending to be sick. But Mrs. Qin didn't intend to let Qin Wanru go. She didn't want to beat around the bush and said directly. Second miss, I heard that this servant girl was newly picked by you. She really doesn't know how to be polite. She actually fought with elder Mrs. Servant Girl. In my opinion, this kind of servant girl is not suitable. Why don't you send her away and ask Madam to find a few more servant girls for you? Nanny Zhou said with a smile. If one was sent away and a few were replaced, it would be a good deal for Qin Wanru. Moreover, Qin Wanru didn't have any feelings for a servant girl who had just entered the mansion. What do you think, mother? Qin Wanru asked calmly. There was a kind smile on Mrs. Qin's face. She said generously, I think so too. Since the servant girl is so rude and caused such a trouble as soon as she entered the mansion, we should just send her away and pick a few more good ones. I heard that Yuru also picked a few that day. You didn't pick many, so let old Maidya bring some more people in and pick some more. Then if the servant girl I picked had a fight with elder sister's servant girl next time, would my servant girl be taken away again and I would have to pick a few more? Qin Wanru pursed her lips and said in surprise. Mrs. Qin's face immediately turned ugly. Mother, although you are not my biological mother, I have always thought of you as my biological mother for so many years. I have always treated you as my biological mother. Could it be that in your heart, I am really not as good as elder sister? Even when the servant girls fought, it was my servant girl who was taken away. Qin Wanru showed a hurt expression on her face and tears rolled down from the corner of her eyes. The latter part of what she said was actually what she had always wanted to ask in her previous life. At this time, she used this as a pretext to say it, which made her heart throb. In her previous life, she really thought that Mrs. Qin was her biological mother. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its own child. She thought that no matter how bad Mrs. Qin did, it was impossible for her to be bad. She had always been obedient to Mrs. Qin. However, she did not expect that it was Mrs. Qin and Qin Ruyu who pushed her into the abyss step by step. Everything was planned by them. In the end, Qin Wanru even lost her life. The so-called kindness of parents and sisterhood were just an illusion. How could Mrs. Qin, who was good at scheming, be true to her? Qin Wanru was blinded by this kinship. Why would I think so? Wanru, she is just a servant girl who has just entered the mansion for a day. Mrs. Qin's face changed and she explained with a hollow laugh. Mother, you don't have to say anything. I won't allow it. Qin Wanru wiped away her tears and said. Why are you so disobedient? You are just a servant girl who has just entered the mansion. How can you not care about the sisterhood? Mrs. Qin was anxious. She did not expect Qin Wanru to be so tight-lipped. What she meant was that she could not reprimand her too much. A servant girl who has been in the mansion for such a long time can be regarded as sensible. She is also a person who has been trained and sent to Big Sister. How could she fight with a servant girl who has just entered the mansion? Mother, whose servant should be replaced and whose servant can leave? Qin Wanru's heart flashed with torrential hatred, but she did not show it on her face. Chapter 54. Qin Wanru's words were so serious that Madame D could not answer. Nanny Zhou hurriedly smiled and said, not only second Mrs. Servant Girl, but also eldest Mrs. Servant Girl. Yes, send them away together. We don't need such troublemakers in our mansion. Madame D nodded repeatedly. At this time, she had no time to care about Qin Yuru's servant girl who went to cause trouble. Send them all away. Qin Wanru tilted her head and asked. Yes, we must send them away together. Of course, these two servant girls can't be kept if they cause discord between you and your sister. Madame D said righteously. That's fine. Mother, can you ask the servant girl to come back first? I have something to ask her. Qin Wanru thought about it and nodded. This girl, I think you'd better not see her. She's just a servant girl who doesn't know etiquette. If you ask her a few more questions, you might get angry. Madame D advised. Mother, if you don't let me see her and ask her clearly, I won't agree to send my servant girl away. If something like this happens again in the future, even if it's 1-to-1, I don't have as many servants as eldest sister, Qin Wanru said with a straight face. Qin Yuru's courtyard had twice as many servant girls as Qin Wanru's. Madame D did not want to agree at first, but Nanny Zhou quietly pulled her clothes, indicating that she agreed. All right then, let this servant girl come and see you. Madame D said helplessly. She called an old maid to bring the servant girl back. Mother, bring eldest sister's servant girl here too. I'll ask her myself what's going on. Qin Wanru said again. Madame D's face became more and more unpleasant, but she still ordered the old maid to bring both of them back. The old maid left quickly and came back quickly. In a short while, she brought Chu Lu and another servant girl back. Qin Wanru knew the servant girl named Shi Huan. Coincidentally, she was also Qin Yuru's second-class servant girl and usually followed Qin Yuru around. Second miss, you have to help me. Your servant girl named Chu Lu came over and bumped into me. She was also scolding me. I was so angry that I fought with her. When Shi Huan saw Qin Wanru, she directly rushed over and cried loudly while pointing her finger at Chu Lu. In comparison, Chu Lu looked much more frightened. Although the person in front of her was her mistress, she had only just entered the residence and did not know the situation in the residence. At this moment, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She could only tremble as she said, "Me. Miss, this servant, did not hit her. Why didn't you hit me? You hit me on purpose." At that time, there were many people who saw it. You are so unreasonable. How dare you slander me in front of second miss and madam? Lu dared Chu Wanru. And she you and she. And she Lu you. She was also Qin Yuru's servant and had always looked down on Qin Wanru. Although she was only a second-class servant girl, she did not take Qin Wanru seriously. At this time, if she wanted to fight, she could. Nanny, you stop Shi Huan. Before Shi Huan could speak, Qin Wanru said coldly, Nanny, you, slap her. Nanny Yu loosened her grip and gave Shi Huan 2 hard slaps on her face. The 2 slaps were so fast that even Madame D did not have time to react. Shi Huan was slapped twice. Second miss, why did you hit me? It was your servant girl who bumped into me. How dare you hit me? She was not afraid of second young mistress. Eldest young mistress had already said that she would take responsibility for anything that happened. Now that Madam was here, what could second young mistress do to her? With confidence in his heart, he spoke in a loud voice. Nanny, you, slap her again. Qin Wanru sneered. Similarly, no one had expected this. Shi Huan received another 2 slaps on the face. Second miss, why did you hit me again? Why did you hit me again? Do you not like the people around first miss that much? Do you want to torture them so badly? Shi Huan was about to go mad with anger. His face was hurting again, and his ears were ringing. He glared at Qin Wanru, wishing he could pounce on her and scratch her face. Mother, is this the servant girl who has been in the mansion for a long time and has been trained for a while? Qin Wanru asked coldly. She was talking to Madame D. Madame D was caught off guard by the slap just now. She didn't even have the time to ask Qin Wanru to stop. At this time, her face darkened and she was about to rebuke Qin Wanru with this matter. However, when she heard Qin Wanru's words, she felt suffocated in her chest and couldn't let it out for a while. This girl was too cunning. Madam, please judge for me. Shouldn't second young mistress not hit me? What right does she have to hit me? I'm eldest young mistress's servant, so it should be eldest young mistress who is disciplining me. What right does second young mistress's servant have to hit me? Furthermore, she did it in front of Madam. She thought it would be an easy thing to do. She could make Madam and first Miss happy. She did not expect that not only did she fail, but she was also hit by second Miss servant. Shi Huan could not take this lying down. Mother, she calls herself a servant to you and big sister, but she calls me, I, all the time. It seems that I am not a master in the heart of mother and big sister's servant girl. Qin Wanru caught Shi Yang's words and said calmly. She knew that Qin Yuru's servant girl always looked down on her and had no respect for her. She would show her true colors if she was provoked. Since Qin Wanru had said this, Madame D could not help Shi Huan even if she wanted to. Her face darkened. Nanny Zhou knew what she meant the best. She immediately ordered an older woman beside her, someone, take her away and send her to old maid Ya. Her words stunned Shi Huan. She could not react for a moment. When first Miss ordered her to hit the servant girl, she did not say anything like this. Was this an act or was it real? Since this girl is a troublemaker and doesn't know the rules, just sell her. Keep my servant girl. Qin Wanru said. Qin Wanru's words reminded Shi Huan. She struggled and looked back. Madam, it was first Miss who ordered me to hit second Miss servant girl. First Miss said that I would be fine. She wanted to say something, but the old maid who was holding her was smart. She stuffed the handkerchief in her mouth and pulled it down. Mother, what do you think of my suggestion? Qin Wanru looked at Chu Lu, who was kneeling in front of her and trembling. She asked with a faint smile. Both servant girls are troublemakers. Deal with them together. Madame D was so angry that she almost fell. She gritted her teeth and stopped talking. Then mother, you'd better send these two servant girls to father's study. I believe father will definitely make them tell the truth. I don't know whether the so-called big sister asked her people to hit my people is true or not. I also want to know. Qin Wanru raised her eyebrows and said lightly. She didn't think it was a big deal. His expression was calm and tranquil. Madame D's face changed. Nanny Zhou gently pulled her sleeves again and rushed to say, Second Miss, don't be angry. It's just a little girl's business. It's not a big deal. Since Second Miss has protected this servant girl, Madam will definitely let her go. But Second Miss, you should be careful. This servant girl looks timid, but in fact, she is extremely bold. Second Miss, don't ruin Second Miss's plan when you use her. Nanny Zhou, if Madame D did not give in now, she could only bring this matter to Qin Huayong. Madame D did not dare. She gritted her teeth and weighed the pros and cons. Then this servant girl will stay with you for the time being. Thank you very much, mother. Qin Wanru smiled and slightly turned sideways on the bed. Chu Lu immediately bowed to Madame D and said respectfully, Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. Seeing that things were completely out of her control, Madame D was no longer in the mood to sit down. She stood up and forced a smile. Since the matter has been resolved, Wanru, have a good rest. I have something to do here, so I will leave first. Forgive me for not being able to see you off, mother. Qin Wanru sat up respectfully. Madame D shook her head and left in a hurry with her servants. She was afraid that she could not help but give this girl a few slaps if she continued to sit down. She was so cunning at such a young age. It seemed that she had to be more careful when dealing with her in the future. Madam, what should we do if we can't get rid of that girl? Nanny Zhou chased up to Madame D and lowered her voice. She was Madame D's confidant, so of course she knew why Madame D wanted to get rid of this girl. Even if we can't get rid of her, we can't let her talk nonsense. Madame D gritted her teeth and said resolutely. But her mouth is on her body. After this, Second Miss will definitely ask about her. If Second Miss finds out anything, it will be bad. Nanny Zhou cautiously reminded Madame D. Get someone to spread rumors about this girl. There are all kinds of rumors, true and false. Let's see how this bitch can tell. Moreover, what happened so many years ago has nothing to do with this bitch. I'm just afraid that Lu Shui's matter will be exposed. Madame D stood still and calmed down. She gritted her teeth and said. She was so angry at Qin Wanru that she fainted just now, but now she had calmed down. Madam, whether it's true or false, second miss will definitely not be able to guess which is the truth. Nanny Zhou's eyes lit up and she praised in a low voice. Madam, you are so smart. How can second miss compete with you? Are you from Jiangzhou? Qin Wanru leaned against the cushion and slowly looked at Chu Lu, whose face was still pale. If a servant girl was not worthy of Madame D's help, then why did she come here in person? Yes, I was born in Jiangzhou. Seeing that Madame D had left, Chu Lu felt relieved and slumped on the ground. She was in a trance and her mind was somewhat scattered. What happened just now had scared her so much that she almost fainted. Fortunately, second miss helped her. Thinking of this, she looked at Qin Wanru with gratitude. If you were born in Jiangzhou, then where are you from? Qin Wanru frowned and asked. She understood the hidden meaning in Chu Li's words. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.